Hey fam. This is Watch Harry. Today's story is gonna blow your mind. Harry rejected Dumbledore's chosen one role and publicly claimed Daphne Greengrass as his betrothed. Show some love with a like and subscribe. Here we go. Chapter 1, The Refusal. The ceiling of the Great Hall had been showing storm clouds since dawn. Nobody mentioned it. The enchanted ceiling had done stranger things, shown blizzards in July, mirrored fog so thick students couldn't see the staff table, but something about the low, bruised purple of those clouds made the usual breakfast chatter feel quieter than normal. Uneasy. Like the castle itself was waiting for something. Harry Potter set down his pumpkin juice and looked at the ceiling for a long moment, then looked back at his plate. He'd been planning this for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of lying awake in the Dursleys' second bedroom, staring at a water stain on the ceiling while the pieces arranged themselves in his mind. 3 weeks of rereading the copy of Wizarding Inheritance and Ancient Rite he'd found in a cardboard box at a Muggle charity shop, the kind of coincidence that stopped feeling like coincidence after the third time it happened to him. 3 weeks of writing and rewriting and burning the drafts in the backyard while Uncle Vernon pretended not to watch from the kitchen window. He wasn't angry anymore. That was the thing. He'd spent 5 years angry, at Voldemort, at the Dursleys, at the reporters who called him a liar, at the Ministry, at Dumbledore in a way he'd never let himself fully think about until this summer. The anger had burned through him after Sirius died, hot and useless and destroying everything it touched, and when it finally cooled, what was left underneath wasn't grief or fear or the hollow resignation he'd expected. It was clarity. Hermione sat down beside him and immediately reached for the marmalade. "You're quiet." "I'm always quiet at breakfast." "You're a different kind of quiet today." She spread marmalade with the precise, even strokes of someone who had opinions about toast preparation. "Are you all right?" "Fine." Ron dropped into the seat across from him, already halfway through a roll. "Malfoy's been staring at you since you walked in," he said, mouth full. "More than usual." Harry glanced toward the Slytherin table without turning his head. Malfoy was indeed watching him, pale and sharp-eyed, with the particular expression he wore when he was trying to figure something out and it was bothering him that he couldn't. "Let him stare," Harry said. Hermione paused with her knife in the air. "Harry." "Hermione. Whatever you're thinking about doing, I haven't said I'm thinking about doing anything." "You have a face," she said. "You get a specific face when you've decided something and you know I'm not going to like it." Ron looked between them. "What face?" "He looks normal to me. He looks exactly like he did the night before he entered the Triwizard Tournament." "I didn't enter the Triwizard Tournament voluntarily." "I know. That's what worries me." Harry looked at her for a moment, at the familiar furrow of her brow, the worry that lived permanently just behind her eyes, and felt a pull of real affection for her, complicated and genuine. She was going to hate this. Not because she didn't love him, but because she did, and because the version of him she loved was the one who needed her to figure things out first. "Enjoy your breakfast," he said. "I mean that. Genuinely." He picked up his own toast and ate it, and the storm clouds in the ceiling rolled slowly overhead, and Malfoy kept staring, and Hermione kept frowning, and Ron ate 3 more rolls without noticing any of it. Dumbledore arrived at the staff table at 8:30. Harry watched him settle into the high-backed chair at the center, the old man moving with that particular kind of deliberate grace, robes the color of twilight, half-moon spectacles catching the candlelight. He looked serene. He always looked serene. Harry had spent years finding comfort in that serenity and had only recently understood that serenity, in the right hands, was a weapon. He waited until the hall was at its fullest. Second years squabbling over the last of the bacon. A pair of Ravenclaws having an intense whispered debate about Transfiguration homework. Neville trying to unstick a herbology textbook from his bag. Ordinary, mundane, achingly normal morning life. Then Harry Potter stood up. He didn't make a production of it. He just stood, the way anyone might stand to reach for a jug of juice, except that he kept standing, and he turned slightly so he wasn't facing the Gryffindor table anymore but the center of the room, and he raised his voice to a pitch that carried. "I'd like to say something," he said. "To everyone." The chatter didn't stop immediately. A ripple takes a moment to cross water, but it stopped. Table by table, face by face, until the great hall was quiet in a way that felt pressurized. Like the inside of a jar someone had just sealed. 400 pairs of eyes turned toward him. Harry felt the weight of them and didn't flinch. He'd stood in front of worse. He'd stood in front of a graveyard and a snake-faced man and a wand pointed at his heart, and those same eyes from across a cemetery had been colder than anything in this room could manage. He looked at Dumbledore first. The old man had gone very still, though his expression remained neutral. "I know this isn't how things are usually done," Harry said. "So I'll be quick." He reached into the inside pocket of his robes and produced a folded document, cream-colored parchment, heavy stock, sealed with red wax that bore the Potter family crest. He'd learned about that crest 3 weeks ago. He'd learned about quite a lot of things 3 weeks ago. He set the document on the table without unfolding it. "Albus Dumbledore has been operating under the assumption that I am the chosen one, the person destined to defeat Lord Voldemort, and that this fact obligates me to a course of action he has designed and directed without my meaningful consent." He said it plainly, without heat. "I'm 16 years old. I didn't choose to be born under a prophecy. I didn't choose any of what's been done in my name, or to me, for the last 5 years. And I'm choosing now to say formally and publicly, I reject that role." The silence cracked in half. It was less an eruption than a simultaneous sharp intake of breath from every corner of the hall, followed immediately by overlapping voices, shock from the Gryffindors, something more calculating from Slytherin, confused alarm from Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw. At the staff table, Professor McGonagall had gone rigid. Snape's expression had become completely, professionally unreadable. Dumbledore had not moved at all. "Harry." Hermione's voice, low and urgent, from directly beside him. "Harry, what are you?" "The document on the table is a formal notice of disengagement," Harry continued, raising his voice slightly over the noise. "It invokes Section 14 of the Wizarding Inheritance and Guardianship Codex, which Dumbledore knows well, since he's the one who allowed my guardianship to be structured in a way that bypassed it. It formally dissolves his custodial authority over my magical education and life decisions. It's already been witnessed and filed." He paused. "With the Wisengamot. This morning, before breakfast." The noise in the hall changed pitch. Higher. More fractured. Ron was staring at him with his mouth open. Neville had gone completely white. At the Slytherin table, Pansy Parkinson was whispering furiously to the girl next to her, but Harry noticed that Draco Malfoy hadn't moved, and wasn't whispering. He was just watching, very carefully, like a man watching a card game who suddenly suspects he's misread the deck. Harry looked at the Slytherin table for a moment, not at Malfoy, but further down. Past the first years and the second years and the cluster of sixth-year students who'd gone very still. Daphne Greengrass was sitting at the far end of the sixth-year section, which was where she always sat. Slightly apart from the others, which was also where she always sat. Her breakfast was in front of her untouched. She had a book open, which was characteristic, but it had been open to the same page for the last 10 minutes, because Harry had been watching her from the corner of his eye since he sat down, and he knew she hadn't turned it once. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the page, with exactly the expression of someone who is very deliberately not looking at something. Harry took a breath. "There's one more thing," he said. The hall quieted slightly, straining to hear. "Under the ancient and noble provision of betrothal claim, which is, for those who weren't raised knowing it, a law that predates the ministry by 400 years and cannot be overridden by it, I am invoking the right of a head of house to name a betrothed." He said it calmly. Conversationally. "I'm doing this publicly because the law requires a public declaration for it to be binding. It's not romantic, it's legal." But the effect is real. It provides mutual protection under wizarding law, it establishes a formal alliance between houses, and it means that certain parties who've been moving pieces around without asking the pieces first will find their options significantly reduced. He turned his head and looked directly at Daphne Greengrass. She was looking at him now. Her expression was, he'd anticipated a lot of possible expressions, and had prepared for most of them, but he hadn't entirely prepared for this one. It wasn't shock. It wasn't fury. It was the expression of someone who has been handed a puzzle they hadn't expected to find interesting, and who is already, very quietly, solving it. I, Harry James Potter, head of the ancient and noble house of Potter, formally and publicly declare my betrothal claim to Daphne Alara Greengrass, of the ancient and noble house of Greengrass. The great hall did not just erupt. It detonated. The first person to recover, in any useful sense, was Daphne herself. She closed her book. Set it aside. Picked up her goblet and took a small, precise sip of pumpkin juice, as though this were something she had scheduled between Charm's homework and correspondence. Then she rose from her seat, unhurried, graceful, with the particular posture of someone who had been trained since childhood to move through rooms like she owned them, and she looked at Harry across the chaos of 400 shouting students. "Potter," she said, at a volume designed to carry exactly as far as Harry and no further. He looked at her. "We're going to have a very long conversation," she said. "But not here." "Agreed. You're going to answer every question I ask." "Truthfully." "Yes. And if I find your answers insufficient," she said, "you'll understand that this ends before it begins." "That's fair." Something in her expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, not warmth exactly, but a door opening a crack. She gave a single, small nod. It was the most minimal possible acknowledgement, but in the context of what was happening around them, it carried the weight of a thunderclap. She sat back down. At the Gryffindor table, Hermione had grabbed Harry's arm and was pulling him back to his seat. "Sit down," she hissed. "Harry, sit down. I know what people are doing. You can't just, that's Daphne Greengrass, she's in Slytherin, her family might be, neutral," Harry said, sitting. "The Greengrass family is neutral. It's one of the reasons I picked her." Hermione stared at him. "One of the reasons? There are several. What are the others?" Harry glanced across the hall. Daphne had reopened her book. She was still not turning the pages, but she was doing it with considerably more composure than before. "I'll explain later." "You'll explain now, Hermione." He turned and looked at her directly, and something in his face stopped her, not anger, not coldness, but the settled, unshakable quality of someone who has been afraid for a very long time and has decided to stop. "I'm not asking for permission. I'm not going to ask for permission. Not from Dumbledore, not from the Ministry, not from Voldemort, and," his voice stayed gentle, "not from you. I love you. You're my best friend. But this is done. I need you to decide if you're with me, not if you approve." Hermione opened her mouth, closed it, and sat back. Her eyes were bright. "I'm going to be furious with you about this for a long time," she said. "I know. Weeks, Harry. Weeks. Probably." Ron had said nothing through all of this. Harry looked at him now. Ron was looking down at the table, jaw working slightly, turning his fork over in his hands. "Ron," Harry said. "My mum's going to lose her mind," Ron said. It wasn't quite what Harry expected. Ron looked up, and his expression was complicated, surprised and unsettled and, beneath both of those things, something that might have been admiration. That's the first thing she's going to say when she hears. She's going to absolutely lose her mind." "Probably," Harry said again. Ron put the fork down. "Were you planning this all summer?" "Most of it." "And you didn't tell me?" "I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't. If anyone knew ahead of time, the wrong person might have heard, and Dumbledore would have found a way to, right? Ron nodded slowly. Right, yeah. He was quiet for a moment. Daphne Greengrass is quite fit, he said finally, with the air of someone trying to find a silver lining, so at least there's that. Hermione made a sound like a kettle considering boiling. I'm just saying, Ron said. Objectively. Dumbledore's response came at noon. Not publicly, not dramatically, just a small cream-colored note delivered to Harry during lunch by one of the school's owls, requesting his presence in the headmaster's office at 3 o'clock. Harry looked at it, folded it, and put it in his pocket. He wasn't going to refuse. Refusing would look like fear. Besides, and this was the part that had taken him the longest to work out, he wasn't afraid of Dumbledore. He was clear on what Dumbledore was and what Dumbledore wanted, and clarity was better armor than anything the old man had ever given him. He spent the time between lunch and 3 o'clock in the library. Not hiding, it didn't feel like hiding, because it wasn't. He was reading. Specifically, he was reading the 4th volume of Wizarding Inheritance and Ancient Rite, which covered the specific protections afforded to a formal betrothal pair under preministry law. There were more than he'd realized. Some of them were genuinely striking. He was halfway through a section on the legal concept of inviolable ward partnership, which meant, essentially, that any magical attack on one member of a betrothal pair created automatic retaliatory grounds for the other, when someone sat down across from him. Not Hermione. Hermione's arrivals in the library were accompanied by the sounds of books being organized. Not Ron, whose arrivals were louder. He looked up. Tracy Davis, Daphne Greengrass's best friend, set her elbows on the table and looked at him with the direct, evaluating gaze of someone running a very quick and very thorough assessment. She had dark eyes and a no-nonsense quality about her that Harry had never particularly noticed before, mostly because he'd never had cause to. She wants to meet you, Tracy said. Tonight. 8 o'clock. The astronomy tower, east side, not the main balcony. She chose the location because it has no active portraits and the usual monitoring charms are calibrated for the opposite face of the building. Harry blinked. She mapped the monitoring charms? She mapped them in 3rd year, Tracy said, completely matter-of-factly. She was bored. She stood up. Don't be late. She's constitutionally incapable of respecting people who are late to things they've scheduled. Noted. Tracy looked at him for another moment. She's not angry, she said, and for the first time something other than brisk professionalism crossed her face, something smaller and more genuine. I want you to understand that, because everyone is going to assume she is. She's not. She's doing the thing she does when something surprised her and she's not ready to let it show yet. A pause. I've known her since we were 8. I've seen that face maybe 4 times. I thought you should know what it means. She left before Harry could think of anything to say to that. He sat for a moment with his book open on the table in front of him, the afternoon light falling through the library windows in long amber slats, and thought about the expression on Daphne Greengrass's face in that first instant after he'd said her name. Before the composure had slid back into place. That fraction of a second. Then he closed the book, tucked it under his arm, and went to keep his 3 o'clock appointment. Dumbledore's office felt different from how it had felt the last time Harry was in it. He'd been here in rage before, after the Department of Mysteries, howling and smashing things while the old man stood there and let him, which in retrospect said everything. He'd been here in grief, in confusion, in the desperate gratitude of a child who needed someone to tell him what was real. He stood in the doorway for a moment and looked around. The familiar whirring silver instruments. Fawkes on his perch, currently in what appeared to be a moody adolescent phase, small and sulky looking, with scrubby feathers. The sorting hat on its shelf, looking, if hats could look things, slightly alert. Dumbledore was behind his desk. He looked the same as always, silver-haired, bright-eyed, hands clasped, except that his eyes, which were usually lit with that particular theatrical twinkle, were still. The twinkle was gone. What was behind it, in its absence, was harder to read. Harry sat down without being invited to. "You filed with the Wiesengemot," Dumbledore said. No preamble. "I did. At 6 this morning. The clerk's name was Matthias Fenn. He was very helpful. The filing was accepted." "Yes." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. "May I ask how you knew about Section 14? "I read." "Harry, I know." Harry kept his voice level. "I know you want this to be a conversation where you explain your reasoning, and I understand why. You think if I hear your reasoning, I'll see why the plan is necessary, and I'll go back to cooperating." He leaned forward slightly. "I've heard your reasoning, Professor. I've been living inside the consequences of your reasoning for 6 years. Sirius died because of your reasoning. I nearly died in a graveyard because of your reasoning. And every year I come back to this school and cooperate and wait for more information and trust that you know what you're doing, and every year I learn something new that you decided not to tell me." Dumbledore didn't move. "I don't hate you," Harry said. "I want to be clear about that. I know what you're trying to do. I think you genuinely believe it's necessary. I think you're wrong." He paused. "Not about Voldemort. I know Voldemort has to be stopped. I know there's a fight coming. I'm not walking away from that, I'm choosing how I walk toward it. The prophecy is one possible version of events interpreted through a medium that's been wrong as many times as it's been right." Harry had looked that up too. "It says neither can live while the other survives. It doesn't say I have to do it your way. It doesn't say I have to do it as the chosen one, with all of the target that puts on me and everyone I love, with the ministry watching every move and the press manufacturing every narrative." He sat back. "The betrothal claim removes me from a certain kind of political chessboard. Greengrass neutrality gives me room to operate that I don't have as Dumbledore's soldier." The word soldier landed in the room and stayed there. Dumbledore looked at him for a very long time. The office was quiet. Fawkes rustled feathers softly. The silver instrument spun. "You are not what I expected you to become," Dumbledore said finally. And his voice, for the first time in Harry's experience of him, was not performing anything at all. Just old, and tired, and perhaps, underneath everything, something close to proud. "I confess I don't know whether that is my failure or your achievement." "Maybe both," Harry said. "The Greengrass girl, Daphne." A pause. "Daphne. She is clever. Her family is neutral." "I know. I'm counting on it." Harry stood. "I'm not asking you to approve. I'm telling you how things are. The filing is done, the declaration is public, and Daphne Greengrass will either agree to the terms or she won't." He moved toward the door. "If she agrees, and I think she will, then I'd like your public acknowledgement that you respect my decision as head of House Potter. Not your approval. Just your acknowledgement that you won't work to undermine it." "And if I won't give that?" Harry turned back. For a moment they simply looked at each other, the old man with his silver instruments and his century of calculated choices, and the 16-year-old boy who had stopped, finally, being afraid of what lay ahead. "Then I go to the Wiesengemot and file for formal independence from Hogwarts as an institution," Harry said. "Which I can do now that Dumbledore's custodial authority is dissolved. I can pursue my NEWTS privately. I have the Potter estate to fund it. I've already located a private tutor." He paused. "I'd rather not. I like this school. I want to stay." Another pause. "But I will leave." He left the office. He didn't hurry on the way down the spiral staircase. There was no need to hurry. The night had not yet begun. The astronomy tower at 8 was cold and very clear. The stars were out, The clouds from morning had gone wherever storm clouds go when they finished their performance, and the castle spread below the east balcony in a way that always made Harry feel the building's age, the way it sat in its own valley like something that had grown there, stone and magic and centuries of accumulated presence. He was 3 minutes early and Daphne Greengrass was already there. She was standing at the rail, her back to him, looking out over the grounds. She'd changed out of her school robes into something dark and plain, practical, not decorative. Her hair was down, which he hadn't seen before. It was paler than he expected, the color of old silver. The cold had put color in her cheeks. She heard him come up the stairs and didn't turn around immediately. He walked to the rail and stood beside her, not close, and looked out at the same view she was looking at. Below, the black lake shimmered. The forest was a dark mass. Somewhere far off, the lights of Hogsmeade were visible. "I want to understand something first," Daphne said, without preamble. Her voice, away from the performance of the school day, was different, lower, more direct. Less weaponized. "Did you choose me randomly? Or did you make a list?" "A list," Harry said. "I was first on it. You were the only name on it by the time I finished." She turned and looked at him. Up close, in the dark, she was more real than she'd seemed across the great hall, sharper, somehow, and less like an archetype. Her eyes were a pale gray-blue and they were doing that assessment thing, moving over his face with an intelligence that wasn't hostile so much as precise. "Tell me your reasoning," she said. "All of it. I don't want the short version." So he told her. He told her about Section 14, and the betrothal provision, and why a neutral house was essential. He told her about the political cover it provided. Neither light nor dark could easily move against a Potter Greengrass alliance without triggering ancient law, and ancient law was the one thing both sides still flinched from. He told her what it did to Dumbledore's board, and what it did to Voldemort's calculus. She listened without interrupting. This, he would later understand, was characteristic of her. She gave people the full length of their explanation before she responded, because interrupting meant missing something, and she didn't like missing things. "Those are the political reasons," she said, when he'd finished. "What about me specifically?" He paused. "You're smart. You've been watching everything in this school for 6 years without anyone watching back. Your family's position is stable enough to withstand the pressure that's coming. You're not in anyone's pocket." He looked at her directly. "And I watched you in the library last year, during the OWL period. Specifically the way you were working, not just memorizing, actually thinking through problems, testing your own conclusions. I thought, if I ever needed someone to think beside rather than just agree with me, I'd want someone like that." Something flickered through her expression. "You watched me in the library. You were 3 tables over for 2 weeks. And concluded what, exactly, from my study habits?" "That you don't trust easy answers," he said. "Neither do I. Not anymore." Daphne looked out at the lake again. A long moment passed. An owl sailed past below them, white and silent, heading for the forest. "My family will have questions," she said. "My father will want a meeting, a formal one, not a letter. He's going to want to understand what this means for the house. I'll meet with him. He's not easy. Neither am I." Another pause. "Astoria is going to think this is deeply romantic," Daphne said, with a dryness so perfect it took him a second to realize it was also slightly fond. "She's 14 and she reads far too many novels. I'll spend a month managing her expectations. How is she otherwise?" The question landed differently than Harry intended. Daphne looked at him with a small, startled quality, as though she hadn't expected him to ask. "She's well," she said, after a moment. "She's the best person I know. But that's not information you need for this." "I know," Harry said. "I was just asking." Daphne studied him. "You're strange, Potter." "So I've been told." I mean it as an observation, not a criticism. She turned back to the rail. Most people who've decided what they want from me spend the conversation trying to close the gap, not widening it with small talk. I'm not small talking. No, she agreed. You're not, are you? It wasn't quite a question. She was quiet for a moment. I want 3 things, she said then. In return for agreeing to this. Tell me. First, I'm an equal in whatever decisions you make that involve the alliance. Not a symbol, not a shield. You consult me. I consult you. We disagree productively when we disagree, and neither of us makes unilateral moves that affect the other without prior discussion. She looked at him. That means no Great Hall announcements about me in the future, unless we've talked about them beforehand. That's fair, Harry said. And I'm sorry about that. I needed the surprise, the announcement couldn't look coordinated. But you're right, and it won't happen again. She looked slightly startled, again, that he'd apologized. Second, she continued. My sister stays out of it. Whatever this becomes politically, whatever comes for us, whoever comes for us, Astoria is not a piece. She's not leverage, she's not a target, and if anything I do as part of this alliance puts her at risk, the alliance ends. No argument. No argument, Harry said. Same terms for Hermione and Ron. Daphne nodded. Third. She paused on this one, just slightly. When this is over, whenever over is, I choose what happens next. Not the law, not your needs, not your war. If I want to walk away, I walk. No obligation. Harry met her eyes. Agreed. She extended her hand. He took it. Her grip was firm and cool and exactly as deliberate as everything else about her. Then we have an arrangement, Potter, she said. Harry. She blinked. If we're doing this, he said, then we're doing it. You can call me Harry. She considered this. The wind came up off the lake and moved through her silver hair and she looked at him, really looked, for a long and quiet moment. Daphne, she said. Not a concession. Not a warmth. Something between the two, which was its own thing entirely. They stood at the rail for a while longer, and the stars came out fully, and the castle was quiet below them, and whatever was coming, whatever the morning would bring, whatever Dumbledore was planning, whatever Death Eater Owl was already winging toward the school with a letter that neither of them knew about yet, it was out there, and they were in here, and for now that was enough. You should know, Daphne said eventually, that half of Slytherin thinks you've lost your mind. What does the other half think? That you've made the most interesting move they've seen in a decade. A pause. Malfoy's been very quiet. I noticed. He's quiet when he's recalculating. It's the only time he's tolerable. She pushed off the rail. I'll send word to my father tomorrow. He'll want to meet within the fortnight. I'll be ready. She moved toward the stairs, and stopped, and looked back at him once, just for a moment, just a glance, the kind that doesn't mean anything definite yet but marks a point of departure from what was before. Then she was gone, and Harry was alone with the stars and the lake and the particular sensation of having jumped off something very high and discovered, on the way down, that he'd meant to. He stayed for a while. He wasn't worried. He was, and this was new enough that he turned it over carefully, checking it from all sides, ready. Something had settled into place today, something that had been tilting and grinding for years, and it felt solid now. Not easy. Not safe. Solid. The castle bell tolled 9 o'clock, resonant and low. Harry turned up his collar and headed back inside. In the headmaster's office, Albus Dumbledore sat for a long time in the quiet, with Fawkes and the spinning instruments and the hat on its shelf. He held a quill in one hand that he hadn't used. In front of him was a parchment with the heading Order of the Phoenix, Urgent Communication, and below that heading, Nothing. He'd been looking at nothing for 40 minutes. He was thinking about a boy who had walked into his office and sat down without being invited and used the word soldier like he was naming something real. He was thinking that he'd spent 30 years being the most prepared man in any given room, and that he couldn't quite remember the last time someone had walked out of a conversation with him having clearly won it. He set the quill down. Outside, the storm clouds had gone. The night was clear and full of stars, and somewhere in the castle, a 16-year-old boy who was supposed to be a weapon was, apparently, becoming something else entirely. Albus Dumbledore did not know yet whether to be afraid of that, or grateful. He suspected, and this was new, that it didn't matter what he decided. Chapter 2, The Negotiation. The letter arrived before Harry finished breakfast. Not by owl, that was the first thing that was strange about it. It came by way of a small, dark-winged creature that wasn't quite a bird, something that landed on the windowsill of the Gryffindor common room at 6:47 in the morning, tapped twice on the glass with a sound like a knuckle on wood, deposited a rolled piece of parchment on the inner ledge, and was gone before Harry had fully crossed the room. He stood at the window for a moment looking out at the empty air where the thing had been, then picked up the parchment. The seal was green wax. No crest, just a smooth circle of green, slightly darker than Slytherin green, with a faint shimmer to it that wasn't reflected light. He cracked it with his thumbnail. The handwriting inside was small and extremely precise, the kind produced by someone who'd been taught penmanship as a form of discipline. Potter, we are aware of yesterday's declaration. The Dark Lord extends his regards, along with the observation that a man who steps off one board has not yet found the board he actually wants to play on. You will hear from us again. This is not a threat. Consider it a professional courtesy. No signature. No house, no name. Just that, and below it, a small symbol he didn't recognize, 2 lines crossing at an angle, with a dot above the intersection. Harry read it twice, then folded it and put it in his pocket. He was still thinking about it when Hermione found him, which took her approximately 4 minutes from her arrival in the common room. You have a face again, she said. Different face this time. She sat beside him on the window seat and held out her hand. He gave her the letter. She read it, and he watched the specific quality of her stillness as she processed it, the way she went very quiet when something had multiple layers that she was sorting simultaneously. Professional courtesy, she said. That's what caught me too. It's not a threat, but it's not neutral either. It's positioning. She turned the parchment over, found nothing on the back, and turned it again. They want you to know they're watching, but they don't want to push you. Not yet. They're recalibrating, Harry said. Same as everyone else. The symbol at the bottom, I don't know it. I might. She was already moving toward the bookshelves near the dormitory stairs, where she kept her overflow books, the ones that didn't fit in her bag. He heard the sound of spines being checked. Give me today. It's not urgent. Everything is urgent, Hermione said, from inside a small avalanche of books. You just haven't realized some of it yet. Harry pocketed the letter and went down to breakfast. Ron was already there, sitting at the Gryffindor table with a plate of eggs he was not eating, staring at the Slytherin table across the hall with the concentrated expression of someone attempting legilimency without the prerequisite training. Harry sat beside him. She's not there yet, Ron said. I checked. She won't be there yet, she's almost certainly in the Slytherin 6th-year girls' dormitory, which is in the dungeons, Ron. Right. A pause. How did last night go? Well. That's it? Just well? We established terms. Ron stared at him. Terms, he repeated. You had a secret midnight meeting with Daphne Greengrass and you came back with terms. It was 9 o'clock. And yes. Harry. Ron set down his fork. I say this as your best friend. You are deeply strange. I've been told. By who? Her, actually. Ron stared at him for another moment, then picked up his fork and resumed eating with the air of a man who has decided that some things are beyond his current capacity to process before coffee. "So what happens now?" he said eventually. "She contacts her father. He'll want a formal meeting, probably within a week or two. Before that, I need to be ready for Dumbledore to make a countermove." "What kind of countermove?" Harry considered. "He'll go to the Order. Probably ask Molly to, not interfere, exactly, but apply pressure. He knows I won't shut the door on people I care about the way I shut it on him." He glanced at Ron sideways. "Sorry. I know your mum's involved." "She's going to be mental about this," Ron said, matter-of-factly. "She already sent a howler last night. McGonagall intercepted it before it got to me, apparently, which, cheers Professor, genuinely. There'll be another one coming." He paused. "She means well. I know she does. She thinks you belong to the Order. That all of us do, sort of. That it's the only way to be safe." He was quiet for a moment. "I don't know if she's wrong," he said, and he was being honest, which Harry appreciated. "I don't know if you're right about this either. But," he shrugged, a complicated shrug that carried more than shrugs usually do. "You're my best friend and you've been carrying this your whole life and you look, I don't know. You look different today. You looked different yesterday. Like something's not pressing on you anymore." Harry looked at him. "So," Ron said, and jabbed at his eggs. "Terms it is. What do you need from me?" Dumbledore moved by 11 o'clock. It wasn't the Order, or not directly, it was Professor McGonagall, who appeared at the door of Harry's morning charms class during a practical exercise involving summoning complicated arrangements of small objects, and asked him, with a kind of precise professional quiet that told him she'd been briefed on what to expect, if he might speak with her briefly in the corridor. He followed her out. She closed the door behind them. McGonagall at close range, without the buffer of a classroom full of students, was a different kind of presence, less the authority figure and more the woman, and she was a formidable woman, straight-backed and sharp-eyed and currently doing a very good impression of professional neutrality over something that was not, Harry could tell, neutral to her at all. "Harry," she said. She only used his first name in private. "I want you to know that what I'm about to say is coming from me, not from the headmaster. He asked me to speak with you, and I've decided to do so, but I will not be his messenger on this. All right. What you did yesterday was, not unexpected, given what I know of you. And more calculated than most people realize. The betrothal provision is real, the filing is valid, and I won't insult you by suggesting otherwise." She paused. "What I want to ask you, directly and as someone who has watched you for 6 years, is whether you understand what you've invited. More than you might expect. The Greengrass family is neutral. I know. That's the point. Neutral families," McGonagall said carefully, "are sometimes targets of both sides, Harry. They're not protected by belonging to either camp. In certain ways, they're more exposed. I know that too. It's why the betrothal provision matters. It gives the Greengrass family a formal affiliation with House Potter, which means any attack on them triggers ancient law protections. It actually improves their safety position." He paused. "I didn't go into this blind, Professor. I researched it." McGonagall looked at him for a long, measuring moment. Something shifted in her expression, the professional neutrality giving way slightly to something more complicated and more real. "Albus believes the prophecy requires you to remain. I know what Albus believes. I'm not the chosen one by abdication, I can't make the prophecy go away. But I can stop performing it on his schedule, with his script, for his strategic purposes." He met her eyes. "The fight against Voldemort isn't something I'm stepping away from. I'm stepping toward it. Just differently." McGonagall was quiet for a long time. Through the classroom door came the muffled sounds of Flitwick's high, cheerful voice demonstrating something. Your mother, she said, very quietly, would have done exactly this. Harry went still. She was the cleverest student I ever taught. Not technically, Hermione Granger technically, perhaps. But in terms of understanding, systems, people, consequences. She saw around corners. McGonagall's voice was controlled but not entirely. She would also have been furious with Albus on your behalf, and she would have said so in precisely the kind of way that leaves a person unable to argue back. She straightened. The moment, whatever it was, closed over like water. The headmaster would like your acknowledgement of the betrothal's implications for Hogwarts as an institution, she said, back to her professional register. The school is technically a guardian entity for students under the Hogwarts Charter. Your filing with the Wisengamot is a parallel authority, and there is a question of which supersedes. I spoke with a Wisengamot clerk on that specific question at 6 in the morning yesterday, Harry said. The answer is the Wisengamot, and I have that in writing. The corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something adjacent. Then there's not much more for me to say, she said. Other than, be careful, Harry. Intelligent choices made quickly can still have consequences that unfold slowly. I know. And be fair to that girl, she said. It came out more directly than the rest, stripped of the professional careful phrasing. Whatever the tactical reasoning, she's a person. A fairly remarkable one, from what I've observed. I know that too, Harry said. It's part of why I chose her. McGonagall studied him once more, turned, and walked back down the corridor toward the staff room without looking back. Harry stood in the corridor for a moment alone, then went back into Charms. He found Daphne's second message at lunch, not delivered, but waiting. She'd left a folded note beneath the book he'd left on the library table that morning, slipped under it with the precision of someone who timed both her arrival and his absence down to the minute. My father has been contacted. He wishes to meet sooner rather than later, his phrase, not mine. He suggested this Saturday at Greengrass Manor. I've told him you'll confirm. I'd appreciate knowing your answer by 3 o'clock, as I'll need to send the owl before my afternoon class. DGPS. The symbol on whatever you received this morning is a marked courier sigil. It means the letter was sent by a Death Eater courier network, not a personal messenger. Whoever sent it wanted you to know it was official communication, not individual contact. I recognize it because my father made sure I could identify such things. This is the kind of contextual knowledge I bring to our arrangement, Potter. Use it wisely. Harry read the postscript twice. Then he wrote Saturday confirmed, thank you on the bottom of the note, added also, Harry, and slid it back under the book. He was at the Gryffindor table eating a ham sandwich when he saw, from the corner of his eye, a flash of silver pale hair moving through the library entrance. Daphne picked up the book, retrieved the note, read it, and the expression on her face, for the quarter second before she replaced it with her usual composure, was something he couldn't quite name. Not quite a smile. More like the expression of someone who had expected a small thing and received a slightly larger one. She put the note in her pocket and left the library without looking across the hall. Saturday came fast. Not because the days between were uneventful, they were not. Dumbledore had, per Harry's prediction, reached out to the Weasleys, which resulted in Ron receiving a very long letter from Molly that he read 3 times and then sat quietly with for an hour before coming to find Harry and saying, "She's asking me to convince you to reconsider." I told her I tried and failed, which isn't technically a lie because I haven't tried and I won't. He'd said this with the air of a man settling something in himself. Harry had gripped his shoulder and not said anything, because sometimes nothing was the right thing. Hermione had identified the courier sigil, cross-referenced it with 3 different sources, and produced a 2-page analysis of Death Eater courier networks that was thorough enough to be slightly alarming. There are 14 known courier sigils, she'd said, spreading parchment across the common room floor while Ron stepped carefully around it. Yours corresponds to the Inner Circle network. Direct correspondence from Voldemort's immediate lieutenants, not outer ring operatives. Whoever sent that letter was making a point about their level of access. Or Voldemort sent it himself, Harry said. Hermione had paused. Yes. That's also possible. I hadn't, yes. She'd written something on the margin of her analysis. The week had also produced one Draco Malfoy, who materialized in the corridor outside the defense classroom on Thursday afternoon and fell into step beside Harry with the studied casualness of someone who had rehearsed the approach approximately 6 times. Don't read into this, Malfoy said immediately. Into what? You appeared out of nowhere and started walking next to me. I'm going to defense. So am I. Then we're going in the same direction. That's not meaningful. Harry looked at him sidelong. Malfoy was doing his carefully composed aristocrat face, which Harry had long since learned was what he wore when he was uncertain about something and couldn't afford to show it. He looked, not diminished, exactly, but thinner than last year. The certainty had gone out of him, the casual cruelty that had run on pure entitlement. What was left was sharper and less comfortable. Greengrass, Malfoy said, without looking at him. What about her? She's not what people think she is. I know. Malfoy glanced at him, sharp. You don't know. You've talked to her twice. 3 times, Harry said. And I know enough. A pause. They turned a corner, navigating around a cluster of third years. Her family is going to be pulled, Malfoy said, quietly now. The performance dropped. When the Dark Lord moves properly, and he's moving, Potter, he's building to something, neutral families are going to be pushed to declare. Your betrothal claim gives them a route, but it's not risk-free. Harry stopped walking. Malfoy stopped 2 steps later, turned, and looked at him. Why are you telling me this? Harry said. The composed face held for a moment. Then, underneath it, something honest and uncomfortable moved. Because I went home this summer, Malfoy said, and I sat at that dinner table and I watched my father talk about what's coming, and he stopped. His jaw was tight. It doesn't matter why. It's information. Do with it what you want. He turned and walked the remaining distance to the defense classroom and went inside. Harry stood in the empty corridor for a moment. Then he followed him in, and sat down, and thought about dinner tables and fathers, and what it must be like to know exactly what your world was going to ask of you and to want, quietly and desperately, for it to ask something else. Saturday. The Hogwarts side gate that opened to the external apparition point was usually used for Hogsmeade weekends. It felt different at 7 in the morning on a cold October day, with Harry alone and in his good robes, which he'd had to have sent from the Potter estate vault, because the estate vault, it turned out, contained a significant quantity of things that had belonged to his parents and grandparents, and among those things were robes in Potter colors, deep blue and gold, cut in the old formal style that he'd thought looked stiff in the mirror but which McGonagall, when she'd seen him come down from breakfast, had looked at with an expression of startled recognition. He had the betrothal documents in a leather folder under his arm. He had the marked courier letter in his breast pocket. He had the 2 pages of Hermione's analysis memorized. Daphne was already at the gate. She was in deep green robes, Greengrass family colors, he understood now, with her hair pinned up in a way that was formal without being fussy, and she looked at him when he approached with the assessment expression she seemed to wear as a default, which he was beginning to find less unnerving and more simply characteristic. You look like a Potter, she said. Family vault. Good choice. She turned to the gate. My father he's going to be formal and testing. He'll try to establish dominance in the first 5 minutes, because he always does, and most people let him. She paused, hand on the gate. Don't let him. I won't. She glanced at him. I mean it. Not aggressively, don't be rude, it'll cost us. But don't yield. He respects people who hold ground and he doesn't work with people who don't. Daphne. He waited until she looked at him properly. I sat down in front of Dumbledore without being invited and told him I was dissolving his authority. I think I can handle your father. Something in her face resolved. Not relief, she wasn't the relieved type, exactly, but a settling, a readiness. All right then, she said, and opened the gate. Greengrass Manor was not what Harry expected, which meant it was probably exactly what it was supposed to be. He'd half anticipated something with Malfoy Manor's grandiosity or the gloomy theatricality of Grimmauld Place. Instead it was, restrained. Old stone, well kept, set back from its grounds with the quiet solidity of something built to last rather than to impress. The garden was extraordinary, which surprised him, formal and precise, but with a quality of real care, like someone who genuinely enjoyed it, not just a groundskeeper's maintenance. Daphne noticed him looking at the garden. My mother's, she said briefly. She died when Astoria was 6. I'm sorry. You say that like you mean it. I do. She didn't respond to that, but she walked slightly closer to him than she had at the gate. Cyrus Greengrass was waiting in the manor's front reception room, not the drawing room, the reception room, which was its own statement about the tenor of this meeting. He was tall and silver-haired, in his early 50s, with Daphne's pale grey eyes and her quality of considering everything before responding. He was also, Harry noticed immediately, doing the thing where he positioned himself in the room so that the light was behind him and any guest coming through the door would be slightly at the visual disadvantage. Harry chose a chair without being invited to sit, picked the one that redirected the light favorably, and set the leather folder on his knee. Cyrus Greengrass watched all of this with the particular stillness of a man who has just noted something. Mr. Potter, he said. His voice was measured. Neutral in the political sense, giving nothing. Lord Greengrass. Harry used the formal title deliberately. He'd researched it. Most people didn't bother. Thank you for the early meeting. I know Saturday is family time. Cyrus sat. My daughter tells me you've made a significant public declaration on her behalf. She also tells me you apologized for the lack of prior consultation, which I confess I hadn't anticipated. A pause. I'd like to hear your reasoning. Not the legal reasoning, the documents are clear enough. The actual reasoning. So Harry told him. More directly than he'd told Daphne, because her father wasn't Daphne, he needed different points, different emphasis. He talked about the political landscape. He talked about what neutral families faced when the war properly began. He talked about what the betrothal provision actually did legally, in specific terms. He talked about what he was building and why the Greengrass alliance was essential to it. Cyrus listened the same way his daughter did. It was clearly a family trait. You speak of the alliance as a protective instrument, Cyrus said, when Harry finished. What do you bring to it, besides the protection of your name? The Potter estate, Harry said. Which is considerably larger than Dumbledore has let me understand. The Wisengamot seat, which I'm in the process of activating. A set of relationships on both sides of this war that, properly managed, create leverage. He paused. And I'm not going to lose. Cyrus looked at him. That is a bold claim. It's a statement of intent. There's a difference. He held the grey eyes. Voldemort has been operating under the assumption that I'm a weapon pointed at him by Dumbledore's hand. I've removed myself from that framing. I'm not a weapon and I'm not Dumbledore's soldier. What I am is someone who is going to end this war on my terms, and I want your daughter beside me when I do, not behind me, beside me. He paused. She is the best strategic mind I've encountered in 6 years at Hogwarts, and I don't say that lightly given the competition. The room was quiet. Daphne, sitting in the chair to his left, had not changed her expression. But her hands, folded in her lap, had, very slightly, relaxed. The marked courier letter, Cyrus said. Harry produced it from his breast pocket and handed it across. Cyrus read it, folded it precisely, and handed it back. You received this the morning after your announcement. Yes. The Dark Lord does not send marked courier communications idly. This represents his personal attention to the matter. He was quiet. He's uncertain about you. I know. An uncertain Voldemort is not safer than a certain one, Cyrus said. I want you to understand that. Uncertainty in him produces improvisation, which is harder to predict than strategy. I know that too. It's also why moving quickly matters. Harry opened the leather folder and placed the betrothal document on the side table between them. I'm not asking you to go to war, Lord Greengrass. I'm asking you to formally align your house with mine under ancient law, which gives both houses protection, gives Daphne a position from which she can operate, and gives me a partner I trust. He looked at the man steadily. I won't make promises about outcomes. The war is real and it's coming, and I'm not going to pretend the risk is zero. But I will tell you that I will not use your daughter as a piece, I will not make moves that affect her family without consultation, and if something comes for her, his voice was level and absolute, it will not get there uncontested. Cyrus Greengrass looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then he looked at Daphne. Something passed between them, a glance that Harry recognized from the outside as private, the compressed communication of people who know each other very deeply and don't need words for it. Daphne gave her father a small nod. Cyrus looked back at Harry. There is one condition, he said. Tell me. Astoria is in her 4th year. I will tell you now what I suspect you've already guessed, she is not in perfect health. The details are private, and I expect them to remain so. His voice was controlled, but Harry could hear what was underneath it, the thing that couldn't be entirely contained by a lifetime of political training. She is not to be put in a position of exposure. No involvement in whatever comes. Daphne asked for the same thing on her behalf, Harry said. She has my word. She had it before today. Cyrus was quiet. Then he uncapped a pen, not a quill, a pen, which Harry noticed, and signed the betrothal document. They left the manor at 10:30. The October morning had sharpened while they were inside, and the garden looked different in the clearer light, the careful geometry of it, the work behind the beauty. They walked to the apparition point at the end of the drive, and for a while neither of them said anything. He liked you, Daphne said. He respected the preparation. That's not the same thing. From him, it is. He doesn't separate them. She glanced at him sidelong. He usually interviews prospective allies for 2 hours. We were in there 40 minutes. Ah. That's not nothing. I know. He looked at the folder under his arm. He knows about Astoria. Yes. Her voice was even. He's known for a year. He hasn't told anyone outside immediate family. A pause, quiet and briefly unguarded. She doesn't know the full extent. She's 14. He doesn't want her spending her 4th year frightened. Harry didn't push it. He walked beside her and let the silence hold the weight, because some things were carried better in silence. You told him you won't lose, Daphne said, after a moment. Yes. Do you believe that? He thought about the graveyard. He thought about the Department of Mysteries and the veil and Sirius's face. He thought about 5 years of being someone else's plan and the particular exhaustion of it, the way it had worn him down until this summer when something had clicked. Rotated. Settled into a different orientation. I believe I won't stop, he said. I think that ends up being the same thing. Daphne looked at him, and this time the assessment expression was gone. She was just looking at him. Directly, without the layers. For a moment he could see exactly who she was under the cool composure and the perfect posture and the Slytherin armor, and it was someone fierce and intelligent and quietly, deeply tired of being underestimated. That might be the most honest thing anyone has ever said to me, she said. About war? About anything. They reached the apparition point. She turned to face him, and they were standing fairly close, the way the small cleared space required, and the morning light was doing something complicated to the silver of her hair. The announcement will have reached the Waisengamot by Monday, she said, back to business, though something had shifted slightly in the register. The formal recognition will be in the Wednesday Waisengamot bulletin. After that, we're legally bound under the provision. I know. The Daily Prophet will have something by Thursday. Probably two things, one political, one personal. They'll try to make it a romance story and they'll try to make it a scandal. Possibly simultaneously. Let them. She raised an eyebrow slightly. I've been a story in that newspaper since I was a year old, Harry said. I stopped caring what they call it. What matters is what it does. Daphne looked at him with the particular expression of someone recalibrating something internal. You're going to be very difficult to manage, she said. I'm not yours to manage. I know. I meant difficult in the good way. She turned and pulled her wand for side along. Hold on, she said, and then she disapparated, taking him with her in a rush of cold compressed nothing, and they landed together at the Hogwarts gate with the satisfying solidity of ground returning underfoot. She released his arm immediately and stepped back to professional distance, and he let her. Lunch, she said. What about it? I'll sit at the Gryffindor table today. She said it without making it into a question or a suggestion, just a statement. It should be public. I'd rather own it than let the speculation run sideways. He hadn't expected that. The surprise must have showed, because she looked at him with something very close to amusement. Tracy will come. Don't try to make conversation with her immediately, she needs to assess people at her own pace. And Malfoy? Will observe. He always observes. She paused. Don't push him. He's closer to moving than he looks and pushing will send him the wrong direction. Harry filed this away, adding it to the growing internal archive of Daphne Greengrass's understanding of the world, the way she read people not as types but as individuals in specific moments of their specific lives. He was beginning to think he'd underestimated her even after estimating her highly. 12:30, he said. 12:30, she agreed. She walked up the path toward the castle, and he watched her go for a moment, and then walked up after her, and the gates closed behind them both with the sound of old iron meeting old stone, solid and final and already changed from what it had been before they'd opened. Back in the Gryffindor common room, Harry found Hermione sitting cross-legged on the hearthrug surrounded by parchment and Ron sitting in the nearest armchair watching her with the serene patience of a man who had learned not to disturb the process. The symbol is confirmed, Hermione said, without looking up. Inner Circle Courier. There are 11 known symbols in this network and yours matches the third variant, which is used for communications originating from Voldemort's direct associates. She finally looked up. How was the meeting? The father signed. Ron sat forward. He signed? Just like that? Not just like that. But yes. Blimey. Ron leaned back. That was fast. What's the next? Hold on. He pointed. You're wearing Potter family robes. Where did those come from? Family vault. You have a family vault? Apparently yes, for the last 16 years. And you didn't know because no one told me, Harry said, and kept his voice even about it, because he'd made his peace with that particular failure over the summer, mostly. The estate management documents were in a Gringotts box that I'd never been pointed to. Dumbledore had custodial authority, he wasn't actively hiding it, I think, just, not telling you, Hermione said. She was looking at the parchment again but her jaw had tightened. Not prioritizing it, Harry said, which was as fair as he could be about it. There's a difference? Ron said. Harry didn't answer that. He sat down in the other armchair and looked at the fire. Daphne's sitting with us at lunch, he said. Ron's head turned sharply. At the Gryffindor table? Yes. Today? Harry checked the clock. About 90 minutes. Ron looked at Hermione. Hermione looked at Ron. A marital-level volume of communication passed between them in a single glance, which would have been impressive if they'd yet admitted to themselves what they obviously were. Right, Ron said. I'll eat extra quickly so there's room. There's plenty of room, Ron. I mean emotionally, he said, and picked up his Quidditch magazine. Harry looked at the fire for a while, and thought about fathers and daughters and quiet gardens, and letters from people trying to tell him that the board beneath him had changed. He thought about what Cyrus Greengrass had said, an uncertain Voldemort is not safer than a certain one. He reached into his breast pocket and took out the marked courier letter and read it a third time. A man who steps off one board has not yet found the board he actually wants to play on. He folded it carefully and put it back. Watch me, he thought, to no one in particular. The fire popped and crackled in the grate, and the common room smelled of autumn and old wood and the particular warm familiarity of 6 years lived in a place, and Harry Potter sat in his chair and thought about next moves. He was still thinking when Ron's Quidditch magazine hit him gently in the knee. He looked up. Ron was pointing at the window. A large brown barn owl was sitting on the outer ledge, holding a letter, and even through the glass Harry could see that the envelope was stamped with the Wisengamot crest. Official notification, then. 3 days early. He stood, crossed to the window, opened it, and took the letter from the owl. The crest on the seal was gold and deep blue, the old colors of magical law, unchanged for 4 centuries. He broke the seal. To Harry James Potter, head of the ancient and noble house of Potter, your betrothal claim, filed under the ancient and noble provision of betrothal, has been reviewed and formally recognized by this body. The alliance between House Potter and House Greengrass is hereby registered in the Book of Alliances. All protections and provisions of the betrothal provision are now active. By order of the Wisengamot, witnessed this day, there was a list of names. He scanned it. Most he didn't recognize. One he did, Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. She'd witnessed it herself. That was a message. He folded the letter, looked at Ron, looked at Hermione. It's done, he said. Officially. The fire crackled. Hermione put down her quill. Then we'd better figure out what comes next, she said, with the tone of someone rolling up their sleeves, because whatever it is, it's already started. She was right. In Voldemort's temporary stronghold, a letter that had received no reply was being discussed. In Dumbledore's office, a man was reading the same Wisengamot bulletin and recognizing, properly and fully, for the first time, that he had lost something that couldn't be retrieved. In Greengrass Manor, a 14-year-old girl was reading her sister's letter with bright, intent eyes and already constructing a reality around what it meant. And in the Gryffindor common room, Harry Potter looked at the fire and felt the machinery of what he'd set in motion turning over beneath everything, deep and sure and gaining momentum. He was beginning to enjoy this. Chapter 3, The Wisengamot. The Ministry of Magic smelled like bureaucracy and old ambition. Harry had been here twice before and neither visit had been pleasant, once dragged in by Aurors after blowing up his aunt, once sitting in a courtroom while Fudge tried to expel him for defending himself against Dementors. He knew the smell of the atrium, the echo of the polished floors, the particular quality of the light from those golden ceiling tiles. He knew how it felt to walk through here as a problem to be managed. Walking in as head of House Potter with a leather briefcase and a formal hearing scheduled was, it turned out, quite different. He'd arrived early, 6:45, the hearing was at 9, and the atrium was still in its morning state, ministry workers streaming in through the fireplaces, robes in every shade of the official spectrum, most of them not looking at anyone else. He stood near the golden fountain, repaired since the battle, gleaming and slightly over-polished, and waited. Daphne arrived 2 minutes later, stepping out of the central fireplace with a composure that suggested she flood regularly and found it neither impressive nor bothersome. She was in formal Greengrass green again, her hair up, a slim folder under her arm that matched his briefcase and the energy it projected. "We have done the reading, we are not improvising." Tracy Davis appeared behind her, a half-step back, dressed in deep gray, not Greengrass colors but deliberately neutral, the choice of someone who understood exactly how they were meant to be read in this room. She glanced at Harry, nodded once, and began scanning the atrium with the alert systematic attention of someone checking perimeter. Harry liked her more every time he saw her. "Anyone else attending who I should know about?" he said, to Daphne. "My father considered it. Decided his absence was a stronger statement." She fell into step beside him as they moved toward the lifts. "His presence would make this about the Greengrass family's interests. His absence makes it about you." "It is about me." "Exactly." She said it like it was obvious. "And about the precedent. Which is why," she glanced at him, "I want to raise something before we go in." "Go ahead." "The hearing is formally structured as a review of your filed notice of disengagement. Dumbledore's representative, presumably not Dumbledore himself, he'll want the distance, will argue that the custodial dissolution is procedurally irregular. They'll say Section 14 doesn't apply to your circumstances because the custodial arrangement was made under emergency wartime provision." She paused. "It's a legitimate counter-argument." "I know. You know how to answer it?" "Section 14 specifically overrides emergency wartime provisions when the ward in question has reached magical majority," Harry said, without breaking stride. "Magical majority is 15 in the old law, not 17. I've been magically adult for a year. They're applying the post-1899 statute to a pre-1899 provision. Wrong era." Daphne was quiet for 2 steps. "You did prepare for this," she said. "I told you I researched it." "Researching and preparing cross-arguments is not the same level as," she stopped. Recalibrated, visibly. "All right. Who helped you?" Hermione found the statutory conflict. "I found the precedent. There are 3 Wisengamot cases from the 1800s that confirm the old law supersedes. I have the case numbers." Tracy made a small sound from behind them that might have been approval. The lift arrived. They stepped in, Harry pressed the correct level, and the golden grille shut with a sound like a vault closing. "One more thing," Daphne said. "Amelia Bones will be presiding. I saw her name on the witness documentation. She's fair. She's also watching everything. She won't tip anything in our direction, but she won't allow procedural manipulation either, which is why Dumbledore won't have sent Dumbledore." She looked at him. "Whatever they send instead, don't get angry. Controlled is effective. Angry is just dramatic." Harry smiled slightly. "You've been planning my behavior for this hearing. I've been planning the outcomes. Your behavior is one variable. Most people would be bothered by that. Most people don't plan the way I do." She said it without arrogance, just fact. "Are you bothered by it?" "No," he said. "Keep going." The lift shuddered and descended. The Wisengamot courtroom was smaller than the one where Harry had faced his hearing at 15, that had been a full disciplinary chamber, theatrical in its dimensions. This was a formal review chamber, stone-walled and serious, with tiered seating arranged in a half-circle around a central floor space. The seats were perhaps a third full when they entered, which was still 40 or 50 people, all in formal robes. Harry recognized perhaps a dozen faces. Augusta Longbottom sat 3 rows up, bolt upright with her vulture-topped hat and an expression that suggested she was prepared to disapprove of everyone present and had scheduled the time for it. Griselda Marchbanks, who'd examined Harry's OWLS, was 2 seats from her. A cluster of ministry officials he vaguely recognized from the prophet occupied the right side of the upper tier. Amelia Bones was at the central desk at the floor's far end. Square-jawed, monocled, with the look of someone who had personally prosecuted enough cases to be immune to most varieties of attempted intimidation. She looked at Harry as he entered and gave him the same look she gave the rest of the room, sharp, impersonal, forensic. He respected it. He took his assigned seat at the central floor table, the advocate's position, which felt strange. He'd spent enough time in this building at a disadvantage, and set his briefcase open. Daphne sat to his right, slightly behind the table's edge in the support position, which had its own formal designation in old wizarding procedure. Tracy took a seat in the gallery. The door opened again and Dumbledore's representative arrived. It was Percy Weasley. Harry had half a second of genuine surprise before the pieces arranged themselves. Percy had rejoined the Ministry after the events at the Department of Mysteries, had apparently been working his way back up with the desperate, precise energy of someone who knew they'd made a catastrophic error and were trying to rebuild brick by brick. He was in full Ministry formal robes, deep red with the official gold piping, and he walked to the opposing table without looking at Harry with a stiffness that was either professional composure or the most extended wince Harry had ever seen. He sat. He placed his own folder on the table. Then he looked up, and for just a moment his eyes met Harry's. It was complicated. Percy Weasley had been a prefect when Harry arrived at Hogwarts, the authoritative older presence who had seemed so certain of everything. He'd believed in the Ministry over his family and his family had been right and Percy had known it and been unable to admit it until the knowledge had become unbearable, and now here he sat on the other side of a table from his youngest brother's best friend, having been asked to argue against him on behalf of the man who'd sent him here. Harry gave him a small, genuine nod. Not hostile. Not warm. Just, I see you, this is awkward, let's be professional. Percy blinked, and something in his shoulders fractionally lowered, and he nodded back, and they were done with that. Amelia Bones called the hearing to order. It ran for 2 hours. Percy was good. Harry acknowledged that fully. Percy Weasley was meticulous and precise and had clearly done his preparation, and the emergency wartime provision argument was genuinely the strongest ground available to him. He made it well, with citations, with proper address to the chair, with the calm logic of someone who had lived inside Ministry procedure for years and knew its architecture. Harry let him finish completely. Then he stood. He laid out the statutory conflict argument exactly as he'd planned it. Section 14, pre-1899 law, magical majority at 15. He placed the 3 case citations on record, the clerk typed them in with audible efficiency. He cited the specific language of the Hogwarts Charter guardianship provision and the way it conflicted with the post-1899 custodial statute Percy had used. He was, and he could feel this, the quality of it, the particular kind of certainty that comes from having genuinely done the work, correct. Not performing correctness. Actually correct. Percy counter-argued twice. Both times Harry answered, and the second time he could see, from Percy's expression, that Percy knew the argument was over. Amelia Bones asked 3 questions. Harry answered them without consulting his notes. Then she called a brief recess, and in that recess Harry turned to Daphne. "How are we doing?" he said, low. "You've won the filing question," she said, equally low. "The custodial dissolution will be confirmed. But there's a secondary matter that Bones is going to raise when we come back." She turned slightly toward him, her voice dropping further. "There's a motion on the floor, submitted 2 days ago, before our hearing was scheduled, to establish a formal Wisengamot oversight committee for what they're calling prophecy-related assets." Harry stared at her. "They're trying to put me under committee oversight. Not you. The asset." The language is deliberately depersonalized. Her jaw had tightened slightly. "It's not Dumbledore's move. It's the Ministry's. Fudge's successor is trying to establish control over the war effort's central resource." "Which is you." "Who filed it?" "Cornelius Fudge's old undersecretaries. The ones who kept their positions." She glanced at the upper tier, subtly. "3rd row, far right. The man in the gray and silver robes. His name is Edmund Cull. He was Fudge's legal architect. Harry found the man, mid-50s, bland-looking in the way that was its own kind of camouflage, papers arranged with neat, institutional precision. He looked entirely unthreatening and entirely certain of his position. "How do I handle it?" "The motion requires your consent to proceed under the Pre-Ministry Persons Act," Daphne said. "Which means if you formally refuse to be designated an asset, they can't make the committee. They'd need a supermajority to override your refusal. Which they won't get today, not with Bones presiding and half the chamber not yet decided." She paused. "Say it plainly when the time comes. Don't argue the legal point, just make the refusal and let the law do the work." Harry looked at her. "You found out about this motion 2 days ago?" "I've been monitoring Wisengamot filings since Thursday." She said it as though this were the obvious thing to do. "I have access to a member's public bulletin service through my father's house seat. It takes about 20 minutes per day to review." A brief pause. "You should activate your own Potter Seats access. The clerk's office can set it up. It's free." Harry looked at her for a moment, at the precise, unsentimental efficiency of how she thought, the way she moved through information, the way he moved through a flying course, reading the air, adjusting, always 3 seconds ahead. "Thank you," he said. He meant it fully. She looked slightly surprised again, that same flicker of the unexpected. "We had an arrangement," she said. "This is what it means." Amelia Bones returned. The gavel came down. The custodial dissolution was confirmed first, exactly as Harry had argued it. Percy accepted the ruling with professional composure and made a note. Harry accepted the confirmation with the same, though he noticed, 3 rows up, Augusta Longbottom giving him a firm, approving nod. Then Bones raised the asset oversight motion. Harry stood before she finished the formal description. "Madam Bones," he said. She looked at him. "Mr. Potter. Under the Pre-Ministry Persons Act, specifically Article 4, I formally refuse designation as an asset, instrument, or resource of any governmental or quasi-governmental body." He kept his voice flat and factual. "I am Harry James Potter, head of the ancient and noble house of Potter, and I am a person. Not an asset. The motion cannot proceed." The chamber had gone very quiet. Edmund Call, in his grey and silver robes, had gone a particular shade of controlled displeasure. "The chair notes the formal refusal," Bones said, and there was something in her voice, not approval exactly, but the precision-edged satisfaction of someone watching law function as intended. "Under Article 4, the oversight motion cannot proceed without the subject's consent. The motion is suspended indefinitely." She brought down the gavel. 3 things happened at once. Augusta Longbottom made a sound that was distinctly Griselda Marchbanks leaned over to the person beside her and said something behind her hand, and Call gathered his papers with the meticulous speed of a man who is angry and is not going to show it. Harry sat down. Daphne, beside him, was looking at her folder with the focused attention of someone who is not going to display any reaction in a room full of Wisengamot members. Her foot, however, under the table, touched his once, briefly. He noted it. He didn't make anything of it. But he noted it. They were in the corridor outside the chamber when Augusta Longbottom found them. She came around a corner with the directness of a woman who moved through spaces as though they'd arranged themselves for her convenience, and stopped in front of Harry with her vulture hat at full authority and her eyes doing their characteristic sharp sweep. "Potter," she said. "Lady Longbottom." She examined him with the thoroughness of someone checking a piece of work. The case citations were correct. The Pruitt case in particular, most people don't cite the Pruitt case because most people haven't read it. "Where did you find it?" "Hogwarts Library. It's in the restricted section, but a teacher can sign access." "Which teacher?" "Professor Slughorn," Harry said. "He didn't ask what I needed it for." Augusta made a sound that conveyed a complete opinion of Slughorn's scholarly judgment in a single syllable. The Greengrass girl, she said then, looking at Daphne directly. Lady Longbottom, Daphne said, with the formal address and the careful composed face of someone who has been introduced to Augusta Longbottom before and has clear memories of it. Your father made the right choice, Augusta said. I'll be telling him so directly. She turned back to Harry. The call motion will come back. Not today, not in this form. But Call is patient and he has access to the ministry's legal archive and he'll find a different angle. She paused. You should expect it within the month. What angle will he use? The Prophecy Registry Act. 1923, it allows ministry oversight of individuals whose destinies have been formally recorded in a prophecy. She said it with the clipped efficiency of someone who had been on this side of legal battles for decades. The act is obscure and rarely used, but it exists and your prophecy was recorded. If he can prove formal recording, it wasn't formally recorded, Harry said. The prophecy was stored in the Department of Mystery's Hall of Prophecy but never formally submitted to the Prophecy Registry. Those are different processes. The sphere was destroyed in the Department of Mysteries last year. Augusta stopped. She looked at him with the expression of someone who has just been shown a chess move 3 plays ahead that they hadn't anticipated. How do you know it was never formally submitted, she said. Because the formal submission requires a signature from the unspeakable who receives it and a cross-certification from the head of the department. I requested those records from the Department of Mysteries archives 2 weeks ago. Harry paused. They confirmed no formal submission on record for any prophecy received in the last 50 years. The silence in the corridor lasted approximately 4 seconds. Augusta said again, but this was a different lower, more considered, less evaluating and more something that might, in a different person, have been called impressed. Come to tea, she said. It was not a question. Next Sunday. Both of you. She looked at Daphne. Your father too, if he'll come. I'll ask him, Daphne said. Tell him, don't ask. He'll respond better to a direct invitation than a question. She turned and walked back toward the chamber with her hat moving at a stately pace. Sunday, she said, over her shoulder. 1 o'clock. Don't be late. Harry watched her go. Beside him, Daphne exhaled a very controlled breath. She terrifies most people, Daphne said. I know. I've met her son. Neville is lovely. He is. Harry picked up his briefcase. She's going to be useful. She's already decided to be useful. That's different. Daphne fell into step beside him. She's been waiting for someone to invest in. Since Frank and Alice, she stopped. Left it. Harry understood. There were griefs that had specific shapes, specific absences that changed the architecture of a person's life. He knew the shape of his own. Tracy rejoined them at the lift, having come down from the gallery with her usual brisk efficiency. She produced a folded parchment and handed it to Daphne without a word. Daphne unfolded it, read it, and her expression, which had been moving subtly through a range of professional variations all morning, went quite still. What? Harry said. She handed him the parchment. It was a ministry internal memo, the kind that flew through departments on paper aeroplanes, but this one had been caught and unfolded. Tracy, he suspected, had sources Harry hadn't asked about. It was short: Committee of Magical Law, Greengrass Family Property Holdings adjacent to known Death Eater gathering points, recommend registry review under wartime property survey provisions. Authorize further inquiry? Pending, call. Harry read it twice. Then he folded it, slowly, and put it in his briefcase. He moved to the secondary pressure point, he said. Within an hour of losing the asset motion, Daphne said. Her voice was controlled, but there was something underneath it now, not fear, but the particular tension of someone who has just seen a threat materialize that was aimed not at them but at someone they were responsible for. It's a pressure move, Harry said. He's not going after the property. He's letting your father know he can. I know what it is. Which means your father gets this information and he starts calculating whether the alliance cost outweighs. My father will not break an alliance over a pressure memo from a ministry bureaucrat, Daphne said, sharp and certain. I know. But someone's betting he will. Harry looked at her. Can Tracy get anything else out of those ministry channels? I want to know who Call has been talking to. Tracy, who had been standing at a slight remove, looked at him directly for the first time without that preliminary assessment phase. Something had settled in her expression, a decision being finalized. I can have names by tomorrow morning, she said. Her voice was straightforward and unhurried. I have 3 contacts inside the ministry's administrative archive. They owe me favors. You have ministry contacts, Harry said. I have contacts everywhere, Tracy said. I'm Muggle-born. People underestimate me and then tell me things. She paused. I've been doing it since first year. Daphne knows. Since second year, Daphne said. I found out in second year. Third year. Second. Tracy's expression was the very picture of neutral. Second year, she conceded. Harry looked between them. I want to say, for the record, that I am very glad we're on the same side. We're allied, Tracy said. That's the accurate term. You're going to be exhausting to work with, Harry said. Daphne has been saying that since second year. Third, Daphne said, with precision. Harry laughed. It was a genuine one, sudden and unguarded, and the sound of it in the ministry corridor, of all places, made Tracy blink and Daphne look at him with that door opening a crack expression. They took the lift up. They were crossing the atrium toward the fireplaces when Harry saw the figure at the far side of the golden fountain. He recognized him before he registered how, the particular quality of stillness, the white blonde hair that was the distinctive shade of someone who'd spent enough of their life in controlled environments that natural light had become secondary. Lucius Malfoy was dressed in full formal robes, walking cane in hand, and he was crossing the atrium from the direction of the minister's offices. He saw Harry at the same moment. They both stopped. The distance between them was perhaps 30 feet, wide enough that the atrium's morning crowd moved between them like a current around 2 anchored points. Lucius's expression was difficult to read. Calculating was the immediate word, but under the calculation was something that ran deeper and older. He had been powerful once in the absolute way that money and ideology and a terrifying master combined to create power, and that had been taken from him, publicly, at the Department of Mysteries, and in ways Harry suspected went beyond the public. He was still dangerous. Men like Lucius Malfoy didn't stop being dangerous when they were humiliated. They became more so. Harry walked toward him. Behind him he heard Daphne's sharp intake of breath. He heard Tracy's footstep as she shifted, not following but repositioning, instinctive. He stopped 4 feet from Lucius Malfoy in the middle of the ministry atrium and looked at him. Not challenging, not performing. Just direct. Mr. Malfoy, he said. Mr. Potter. Lucius's voice was the smooth, unhurried register of someone managing the distance between what they were feeling and what they were showing. His eyes moved over Harry's formal robes, over the briefcase, over Daphne, who had followed him, of course, without hesitation, with the swift cataloging of a man who had spent decades reading rooms as strategic environments. I hear you've been making interesting choices, Lucius said. I make all my choices interesting, Harry said. Lucius almost smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. The Greengrass girl, he said, glancing past Harry. Daphne Greengrass, Harry said. The formal term is my intended. She'd prefer that. Lucius looked at Daphne, who met his gaze with a composure so absolute it constituted its own form of response. Your father is well? Lucius said to her. My father is very well, Daphne said. He'll be visiting the Longbottom estate next Sunday for tea. He'll be pleased to know you were asking after him. A pause of approximately 1 heartbeat. He'll tell his friends, naturally. People are always interested in who's inquiring about whom. Harry filed the move away with quiet admiration. She just told Lucius, with perfect politeness, that his interest in Cyrus Greengrass would be noted and circulated in the right social circles. It was the kind of sentence that could not be argued with and couldn't be comfortably ignored. Lucius looked at her for a moment, then at Harry. "The Wisengamot ruling this morning," he said. "I'm told it went in your favor. You heard quickly." "I hear things quickly. It's a habit." He paused. "Call is persistent. And he has friends in departments that are more useful than the ones he occupies." Something in his expression shifted, fractional and deliberate, the kind of shift that was meant to be noticed. "He also makes enemies carelessly. It's a weakness." Harry held his gaze. The atrium moved around them, gold and light and bureaucracy. "I appreciate the observation," Harry said. "It's not an offer," Lucius said sharply. "Don't mistake an observation for a gesture." "I'm not." "Good." The sharp quality smoothed back out. "My son is in your year." "I know. He's," a pause that carried more weight than Lucius probably intended. "He's at a particular juncture." "I know that too," Harry said. "I'm not his enemy. I'm not choosing to be." Lucius looked at him for a long, measuring moment. Whatever was happening behind his eyes was complex and private, and Harry suspected it had nothing to do with power and everything to do with a father who knew what was coming for his son and could not stop it and could not say so. "The Greengrass alliance is well constructed," Lucius said finally, in the tone of a professional opinion offered without investment. "It will hold up." He inclined his head, not a bow, nothing like a bow, but a formal acknowledgement, and walked past them toward the lifts. Harry turned and found Daphne looking at him. "You walked up to Lucius Malfoy," she said. "Yes. Most people don't do that." "I know." "He was delivering information," she said, processing it. "The comment about Call's enemies. That wasn't idle." "No. He's going to do something about Call, or he's positioning to. He wanted us to know so we don't move first and create conflict between us." Harry started walking again toward the fireplaces. "He's playing his own game." "He always is," Daphne said. "The question is whether it intersects with ours. Sometimes it will. Sometimes it won't." He glanced at her. "But he confirmed something." "What?" "That the betrothal claim is read as serious by the right people." He paused at the flue fireplace, took the powder from the communal dish. "Lucius Malfoy doesn't stop in the middle of a ministry atrium to give information to people he doesn't consider worth considering." Daphne stood beside him at the fireplace. Behind them, Tracy was already pulling her own measure of flue powder. The atrium noise washed around them, and for a moment, just a moment, it was the three of them on one side of something, and everything else on the other. "The tea with Augusta Longbottom," Daphne said. "Sunday. I'll need to speak with my father beforehand." "Of course. And I want to review the Prophecy Registry Act records before then." "If Call tries that angle next, Hermione's already on it," Harry said. "At her look," he added, "I old her from the hearing break. She'll have a full analysis by this evening." Daphne paused. "Then, your friend is rather remarkable." "She really is," Harry said. "You should tell her that sometime. It'd mean more coming from you." Daphne tilted her head slightly. "Why from me?" "Because you don't say things you don't mean," he said, "and she'll know that." He stepped into the fireplace and said the words clearly, and the green flames took him, and on the other side, the cold of the Hogsmeade public flue, the smell of October and approaching winter. He stepped out and waited. Daphne came through 30 seconds later. Tracy 30 seconds after that. They walked back toward the castle through the village street, the morning having given way to early afternoon, the sky a sharp November approaching gray, their footsteps steady on the cobblestones. "How do you feel?" Daphne said, without her usual careful registration. Harry thought about it honestly. "Like something started," he said. "Not like it's going well or badly. Just, started. Like the first move on a board. The other players are moving too. That's what makes it interesting." Daphne looked at him, the direct look, the one without the armor. "You genuinely mean that," she said. "I've spent 6 years being a target for things I didn't choose," Harry said. "Choosing what I'm a target for is considerably more enjoyable." They walked under the gate into Hogwarts grounds, and the castle rose ahead of them, and the afternoon was all grey and cold and the distant smell of the lake, and something in the quality of the three of them moving through the grounds together felt settled. Purposeful. Like a thing that had been in the process of forming had found its shape. That evening, in the Gryffindor common room, Hermione produced her analysis of the Prophecy Registry Act at 7:45 precisely. It was 4 pages, annotated, with 3 cases cited and 2 ministry memos from the public archive attached. "The Act has a fundamental flaw," she said, spreading it on the table between herself, Harry, and Ron, who was eating a biscuit and attempting to follow along with the concentrated expression of a man who has decided to engage. "It requires that the person named in the prophecy be alive and the prophecy be recoverable. The sphere was destroyed at the Department of Mysteries. The prophecy itself was heard and memorized by Dumbledore and relayed to you, but that's not a formal record, it's testimony. Testimony doesn't activate the Act." "Can they create a new record from testimony?" Harry said. "Technically yes, under the emergency records provision. But that provision requires the testimony to be given under oath before a full Wisengamot session, with the consent of all parties." She looked at him over the top of her parchment. "You could refuse consent. What happens if I do?" "Nothing. They can't compel testimony about a prophecy under any active law. The old compulsion statutes were repealed in 1976. She paused. "I also found something else." "Tell me." "The original prophecy, when Voldemort heard part of it from Severus Snape, which is how he learned about it in the first place, it technically transfers the magical weight of the prophecy from the original record into lived event. The moment Voldemort acted on it and went to Godric's Hollow, the prophecy entered what old wizarding law calls fulfillment phase. The Ministry can't oversee a prophecy that's already in fulfillment phase. It would be like legislating gravity." She set the parchment down with the satisfaction of someone who has found the load-bearing wall of a structure and confirmed it can't be moved. "Call doesn't know about this. If he did, he'd have led with the asset motion instead." "Send a summary to my Wisengamot member bulletin access," Harry said. "I'll have it registered as a formal legal position." Ron looked up from his biscuit. "You have a Wisengamot member bulletin access now?" "Since this afternoon." "You've had the worst week of bureaucracy I've ever witnessed and you're enjoying yourself," Ron said, with a kind of baffled affection. "It's better than waiting for someone else to make decisions," Harry said. "Mate, most people wait for someone else to make decisions. That's what most people do." "I know." Harry looked at Hermione. "This is excellent work." She made a small sound that combined satisfaction and continued exasperation in roughly equal measure. "Augusta Longbottom Sunday tea," she said. "I want a full briefing before you go." "Already planned for." "And you'll tell Daphne about the fulfillment phase argument?" "She'll have a copy of your analysis tomorrow morning." Hermione looked at him for a moment, then at the parchment, then back. "She's good, isn't she?" she said. "Not a question exactly." "Yes. I don't say that easily." "I know you don't." "It was actually the fulfillment phase clause I thought she'd catch first. If she was doing the reading, she was doing the reading," Harry said. "She'd already pulled the act. She just hadn't gotten to that section." Hermione nodded slowly. "Good," she said, with the tone of someone who has updated their assessment and is satisfied with the new data. Ron ate his biscuit. "I genuinely cannot keep up with any of this," he said cheerfully, "but I feel like we're winning something." "We're winning the preliminary rounds," Harry said. "The main event hasn't started." The fire was warm. The common room was full of the ordinary evening sounds of Hogwarts students doing ordinary evening things, and somewhere below in the dungeons a silver-haired girl was very probably reading the same act in her own copy and arriving at the same conclusions from a different angle, and across London in a cold formal office Edmund Call was looking at a list of possible next moves that was shorter than he'd expected, and in whatever dark space Voldemort occupied the next move was being calculated. Harry looked at the fire. The board was set. The pieces were moving. He was ready. Chapter 4, The Test. The second letter came on a Tuesday. Same dark-winged courier, same green wax seal, same small precise handwriting. It arrived at 7 in the morning, tapping its 2 sharp knocks on the common room window while Harry was the only one awake, sitting in the armchair nearest the fire with his copy of the Prophecy Registry Act annotated margins and a cup of tea going cold beside him. He crossed the room, opened the window, and took the letter. The courier was gone before he could look at it properly. He cracked the seal. "Potter, the Dark Lord has a proposal." "Not a demand. A proposal. There is a location, the old Selwyn estate in Wiltshire, abandoned for 30 years, where a conversation might take place between yourself and a representative of our Lord's choosing. The date is Saturday next, at dusk. Come alone or don't come. Bring weapons or don't bring them. This is not a trap. You will understand why when you arrive. If you choose not to come, we will understand that choice and respect it. You will hear from us again in other ways. The symbol below is a parley seal. It means what you think it means." Harry read it twice. The symbol at the bottom was different from the courier sigil, 2 hands, stylized, one open and one closed. He folded the letter, looked at the fire, and thought. Then he picked up his quill and wrote 2 notes. One to Daphne. One to Hermione. Both said the same thing: meet me in the library at 8. Don't bring this up at breakfast. Absolutely not, Hermione said. She said it in the particular register that combined genuine alarm with the forward momentum of someone already 3 steps into solving the problem. She had the letter in her hands and she'd read it twice already, and the look on her face was the one she reserved for situations she considered both dangerous and controllable, which meant she was already working out how to control it. I'm going, Harry said. Harry, I'm going, he said again, patient and flat. I want to think about how, not whether. Hermione opened her mouth, closed it, set the letter on the table between them with the precise care of someone managing the urge to crumple it. Why, she said, and it wasn't a question about his reasoning, it was a question about his logic, which was different. Because they sent a parley seal, he said. Which is old law, binding magical contract on both sides. If they break a parley, the curse consequences are severe enough that Voldemort himself wouldn't risk it, not publicly, not with the Wisengamot now in the picture. He paused. Also because they said proposal, not ultimatum. They want something. They want you dead, Hermione said. They've wanted me dead for 16 years. They had me in a graveyard at one point and tried it properly. If dead was the goal today, they wouldn't write letters. He looked at her. They're recalibrating. I told you, stepping off Dumbledore's board makes me unpredictable. Unpredictable people get proposals, not assassination attempts. Daphne had been quiet through this exchange. She was sitting across from Harry with the letter in front of her, and she'd read it once and not touched it since, and her expression was the fully analytical one, all the subtext stripped out, just pure processing. The Selwyn estate, she said. You know it? I know of it. The Selwyn family were Death Eaters, original circle, not recent recruits. The estate's been empty since Aldrich Selwyn was killed in the First War. She looked up. Using it for a parley is deliberate. It's neutral ground by association, a Death Eater property that predates the current war and carries its own historical weight. Whoever proposed this location has a precise understanding of symbolic messaging. Voldemort himself, Harry said. Or someone thinking at his level. She paused. The fact that the letter says, a representative of our Lord's choosing, is interesting. He's not coming himself. Which means either he doesn't trust the parley protections enough to risk his physical presence, he doesn't, Harry said. He's spent 30 years avoiding physical exposure. Or he wants this representative to speak for him without him being directly implicated in whatever the proposal is. She looked at the letter again. If the proposal goes wrong, if you refuse it, if it's something politically damaging to say aloud, he has distance. That's my read too. Which means the proposal is something he's uncertain about, Daphne said. Something he's not sure you'll accept, which means he actually needs your answer to be yes. She sat back slightly. What could Voldemort want from you that requires your agreement? The library was quiet around them. Morning light coming through the high windows, dust moving in the beams, the smell of old parchment and wood. A second year was asleep over a charms textbook at the far end of the room. He wants me off the board, Harry said slowly. Not dead, that's the easy answer, and he knows easy answers don't work with me. He wants me to stop being a problem. And the problem isn't me specifically, it's the position I've put myself in. Head of House Potter. Wisengamot seat. Greengrass Alliance. Neutral but visible. He paused. I'm harder to maneuver around now than I was when I was just Dumbledore's soldier. He might want an actual agreement, Daphne said. A formal one. Non-aggression, or a sphere of influence arrangement. You stay out of his campaign, he stays out of yours. She said it evenly, without judgment, laying it on the table as a possibility. He'd know I'd never agree to that. Would you? She said. Harry looked at her. No, he said. He kills people. He killed my parents. A non-aggression pact with Voldemort isn't neutrality, it's complicity by another name. I know. I'm checking that you know. She held his gaze for a moment, then looked away. Then go find out what he wants. But not alone. The letter said come alone or don't come. A parley seal applies to hostile action, not to who accompanies you. She was precise about it, not pushing, just correct. I'm not suggesting an army. I'm suggesting that you go in knowing someone is in position who can move if the parley breaks, and that someone understands the situation well enough to act with judgment rather than panic. Harry looked at Hermione. Hermione had been watching this exchange with the expression of someone who came in ready to fight one argument and has found themselves disarmed by a different one. She's right, she said, through what was clearly an adjusted position. Daphne's right. The parley seal is specific about hostile magical action, it doesn't prohibit a support presence outside the meeting site. I want to be clear, Harry said, looking at both of them. If you're there, you're outside the perimeter. You don't come in regardless of what you hear. A parley seal breaking would be visible, there'd be a magical disturbance. That's your signal. Agreed, Hermione said. Daphne nodded once. And Ron, Harry said. He's going to want to come, Hermione said. I know. Let him. He's better than people give him credit for in a crisis. He paused. Don't tell anyone else. Obviously, Daphne said. He looked at her, at the cool precise face, at the gray-blue eyes that were doing that thing where they carried more than they showed. Saturday, he said. Saturday, she said. The week moved with the peculiar stretched quality of time before something significant. Harry went to his classes. He ate his meals. He played a Quidditch practice on Wednesday that he enjoyed unreservedly. Being on his broom was still the one thing that asked nothing of him except speed and instinct, and he came back down to earth after an hour in the cold air feeling cleaned out, like something had been rinsed through him. He found Draco Malfoy waiting at the edge of the pitch. Malfoy was not in Quidditch gear, he was in his regular school robes, hands in his pockets, with the look of someone who had positioned themselves casually and was hoping the casualness was convincing. It wasn't, quite, but Harry gave him the courtesy of treating it as though it were. "Practice?" Malfoy said. "Just finished. How's the new clean sweep treating you?" "It's fine. Not a firebolt." He fell into step and Malfoy, after a half-second hesitation, walked alongside him toward the castle. "Something on your mind?" Malfoy was quiet for long enough that Harry thought he was going to deny it. Then, "My father came home last night." Harry said nothing. He's not supposed to be in contact with." Malfoy stopped. "There are restrictions on his movement." "He came anyway. He was there when I woke up and gone before breakfast." A pause. He looked, another stop. Harry waited. "He wanted to know about you. About the betrothal, the Wisengamot hearing. How you seemed." "What did you tell him?" "That you seemed fine." Malfoy glanced sideways. "That you seemed better than fine." Another pause. He said. He stopped a third time, and Harry understood that this was the thing Malfoy had come to say and was finding the shape of it difficult. He said, "Whatever's coming, you've built something real." Those were his words. Something real. Like it surprised him. The castle was getting closer. The evening was dark blue and cold, stars starting to appear. "He's not wrong," Harry said. "No." Malfoy's jaw worked. I want you to know that I don't, what my family has done, what they're part of." He stopped. Breathed. "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that whatever move you're making, I don't think it's wrong. Just," his voice tightened. "Don't let it get you killed." It was the last thing Harry expected and the most honest thing Malfoy had said to him in 6 years. "I don't intend to," Harry said. Malfoy nodded once, stiffly, and at the castle entrance turned and went in a different direction without looking back. Harry stood at the entrance for a moment in the cold air, thinking about fathers and sons and the particular loneliness of being on the wrong side of something and knowing it and not yet knowing how to cross over. Saturday arrived. They apparat from the Hogsmeade Gate at 4 in the afternoon, all 4 of them, Harry and Daphne and Hermione and Ron, and landed in the Wiltshire countryside near enough to the Selwyn estate that its gates were visible down the tree-lined road. The estate sat behind high stone walls and iron gates that had gone green with age, surrounded by grounds that had been left to become what they wanted. Overgrown yew hedges. The ghostly shapes of old formal gardens gone to seed. It looked, Harry thought, exactly like what it was, a place where something had ended violently, 30 years ago, and nothing had grown in its place. He turned to the others. Ron had his wand out already, held low and ready, and his expression had the focused seriousness that Harry had seen on him in the Department of Mysteries and trusted fully. Hermione had her wand up, doing a quiet sweep of the perimeter. He could see the faint shimmer of her detection charms moving outward in rings. Daphne stood very still, eyes on the gate, working through something internally that she'd share when it was ready. "Perimeter?" Harry said. "Clear to 100 yards, Hermione said. "No active jinxes, no monitoring charms within that range. There's something older on the gate itself, not hostile, more like a ward lock. It'll open for you." "How do you know?" "The Parley seal creates access for the named party." "You were named." She lowered her wand and looked at him. "The ward will acknowledge you." He nodded. "You 3 stay here. The tree line's good cover. If the parley breaks, we know," Ron said. "Don't be a hero about it. Move smart." "Harry." Ron gave him a very level look. "I know how to fight. Go have your meeting." Harry looked at him for a moment, at his best friend's steady brown eyes, the quiet competence of him, the absolute reliability that had nothing to do with being flashy and everything to do with being there, and felt the familiar pull of gratitude that he'd never been very good at saying out loud. He gripped Ron's shoulder once, briefly. Ron nodded. Then he looked at Daphne. She was watching him with the direct look, the unarmored one. "Be careful," she said. Not as a platitude, as an instruction, precise and meant. "Always," he said. "You're not always careful, you're often reckless." Her voice was level. "But tonight, specifically, be careful." "I'll be careful tonight specifically." Something moved through her expression, fast and unguarded and then gone, back behind the composure. She looked at the gate. "Go," she said. He went. The gate opened when he touched it. Not dramatically, no groan of ancient hinges, no magical flash. Just a smooth, quiet swing inward, the wardlock acknowledging him the way Hermione had predicted. He walked through and it closed behind him without a sound. The grounds were different inside the walls. Outside had been the wildness of 30 years' abandonment, inside felt more like stillness, a held breath rather than neglect. The path to the house was clear of debris, which meant someone had prepared this. The house itself was intact, all its windows dark except for one lit ground floor room whose warm amber light made it look, from the outside, almost habitable. He walked up the path, wand in hand, not raised, just held. His senses were up. He wasn't performing calm, he was actually calm, the particular controlled readiness that came from knowing where he was and what he was doing and having chosen to be here. His heartbeat was even. The cold was clean. The front door was open. Inside was a single large room, originally a formal reception or drawing room, its furniture either removed or covered. 2 chairs had been placed in the center, facing each other, with a low table between them. A fire in the grate. The amber light came from 3 lanterns positioned around the room. In one of the chairs sat Severus Snape. Harry stopped in the doorway. He took in the scene completely, Snape in his usual black, hands folded, expression in its default configuration of controlled superiority, but with something beneath it that was different from the classroom version. Something that had been stripped down to a core functionality. He looked, Harry thought, like a man who had been doing something extremely difficult for a very long time and was nearing the limit of it. "Sit down, Potter," Snape said. Harry crossed the room and sat in the other chair. The fire crackled between them. "You're the representative," Harry said. "Clearly." "Why you?" "Because I am the only person the Dark Lord trusts sufficiently and who also has sufficient context for this conversation." Snape's voice was flat and precise. "He does not trust easily. I am an anomaly in that respect." "I know about the anomaly," Harry said. Snape's eyes sharpened. "What do you know?" "Enough," Harry said. He wasn't going to lay out his hand before he knew the game. "What's the proposal?" Snape looked at him for a long moment. The fire shifted, shadows moving. "The Dark Lord," Snape said, and something in the way he said the title was mechanical, a performance of allegiance that had worn its own grooves smooth, is operating under a revised strategic understanding since your Wisengamot filing. Revised how? He had been operating under the assumption that you would remain within Dumbledore's framework. That the prophecy's fulfillment would occur on a timeline and in a context that he controlled, that he could engineer the conditions under which you met, and that those conditions would favor him. Snape paused. "Your actions over the past 2 weeks have disrupted that understanding significantly." Harry said nothing. He was listening for what was under the words. "He is not accustomed to uncertainty," Snape continued. "He is accustomed to complexity, to setback, to delay. But genuine uncertainty about the shape of what's coming is unfamiliar to him. It produces a quality of attention that is not entirely comfortable for those around him." "He's nervous," Harry said. He would not use that word. What word would he use? Recalibrating. The ghost of something passed across Snape's face, not quite humor, but its austere cousin. He has concluded that the most dangerous version of you is the version that acts without obligation. A Harry Potter who belongs to no side and answers to no structure is considerably less predictable than a Harry Potter who is Dumbledore's designated sacrifice. The word sacrifice landed in the room and stayed there, and Harry felt it the way he felt most hard truths, not as a shock but as a confirmation of something he'd known and not yet fully named. Dumbledore was going to let me die, he said. Not a question. He was going to ask you to, Snape said, with the specific precision of a man distinguishing between two terrible things. Is there a difference? He believed there was. Whether he was correct is a question I am not positioned to answer. A pause. The proposal. Tell me. Snape straightened slightly. The Dark Lord proposes a formal acknowledgement of House Potter's independent standing. He will not target you, your allies, or the Greengrass family for as long as you refrain from active aggression against his campaign. In return, he wants your public confirmation that you act independently, not as an order operative, not as Dumbledore's agent. A statement of genuine neutrality. Harry listened to the whole thing. Let it sit for a moment. What he actually wants, Harry said, is for me to publicly confirm that Dumbledore's war effort has lost its central figurehead. He wants me to give him a propaganda victory. Snape said nothing, which was its own answer. He'd use my statement to undermine the order. To suggest that even the Chosen One has abandoned the cause. Harry shook his head. I'm not doing that. I advised against this approach, Snape said, and there was a dryness to it that suggested this was true. What did you advise? Snape was quiet for a moment. The fire had settled into a steady burn, less dramatic than it had been when Harry walked in. The lanterns cast even, warm light across the dust and the old covered furniture and the specific waiting quality of an empty house. I advised that you were not a man who could be bought with safety, Snape said. That the proposition of non-aggression would be read, correctly, as an attempt to neutralize you without conflict. And that you had more intelligence than to be neutralized by a comfortable offer. Harry looked at him. What do you actually want, Professor? The question hung in the air. Snape's expression shifted, a slow, significant shift, like watching an iceberg turn, and underneath the professional neutrality and the controlled superiority there was something else, old and abraded and carrying a weight that hadn't lightened in decades. I want you to survive, Snape said. It came out flat and unornamented, the way things do when they're simply true. That has always been a consistent objective. Harry was quiet. He thought about a greasy-haired professor who had been unpleasant to him for 6 years and had also, in ways Harry was only beginning to be able to count, kept him alive. The two things existed simultaneously and neither one cancelled the other. What happens when you go back and tell him I refused? Harry said. He will be frustrated. He will recalibrate further. Snape's voice was even. He will not break the parley. The consequences of breaking a parley seal are severe enough that even he respects them. But he will begin looking for a pressure point. He paused. He will look for someone you cannot afford to lose. Harry felt something cold move through him, not fear exactly, a focused kind of alertness. He'll go after the people around me. He will attempt to identify the softest target. Snape looked at him directly. The Greengrass girl. She's protected under the betrothal provision. Ancient law protections are significant but not absolute, Snape said. They create consequences for attack, not prevention of attack. A sufficiently motivated actor who is willing to absorb the consequences, he stopped. I am telling you this so that you move before he does. Not to frighten you. Because I believe you are capable of anticipating and moving first. Harry looked at the fire. He processed all of it, the shape of the proposal, its actual purpose, the information Snape had just handed him that went beyond anything the letter had suggested. The Selwyn estate, Harry said. Is there anything here worth having? Snape blinked. It was the smallest possible response, but from Snape it was equivalent to a double take. What? The Selwyn family were original Death Eaters. This estate has been abandoned for 30 years. There may be documents, research, records of old magic here that would be useful to me. He looked around the room. Did Voldemort authorize you to come here, or did he authorize you to use the location? A very long pause. He authorized the location, Snape said, carefully. Then what's in this house isn't part of the parley. Harry stood. I'd like to look around. Snape stood also, and his expression was doing something complicated, the controlled surface managing an undercurrent that might, in another man, have been admiration. You came here to search the estate, he said. I came here because they told me to come here, Harry said, and because I wanted to hear the proposal, which I've heard and rejected. But since I'm here anyway, he shrugged. Selwyn was one of the first. He worked directly with Voldemort before the First War. There might be something useful. You have approximately 2 hours before the parley window closes, Snape said. And then, after a moment, as though the decision had been made somewhere below the level of deliberate choice, the study is on the 2nd floor. It was Selwyn's personal workspace. If there is anything worth finding, it will be there. Harry looked at him. The parley protects both parties, Snape said, his voice crisp and professional. I am the Dark Lord's representative. I have an obligation to ensure the meeting concludes without incident. A pause. I did not say anything about what happens within those parameters. Harry turned toward the staircase. The study was extraordinary. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, 30 years of dust over everything, and among the ordinary dark arts volumes, predictable, catalogued in his mind already, not worth the wait, 3 things that were not ordinary at all. The first was a journal. Selwyn's own hand, cramped and precise, covering 20 years of independent research into what he called anchor magic, the theory that a magical practitioner could create permanent, location-bound anchors for specific spells that would persist long after the caster's death. Not Horcruxes, not soul magic. Something older and stranger. Harry read enough of it to understand that Selwyn had been working on a theory that Voldemort had apparently never used, which meant either Voldemort had dismissed it or hadn't known about it. The second was a thin, hand-bound pamphlet titled On the Dissolution of Binding Curses, a pre-ministry approach, which covered exactly the kind of old-law magic that Harry had been researching since summer. He took it without hesitation. The third was a letter, unsealed, unaddressed, written in a hand he didn't recognize. He read it standing at the desk, in the lantern light he'd brought up from below. It was addressed to whoever finds this after my death, which had the unsettling quality of a thing that had been waiting for exactly this moment for exactly 30 years. It described, in brief, technical terms, a location. Not named, just described, the confluence point of 3 ley lines in northern Scotland, beneath a hill the Muggles call something in their language that means the Hill of the Seer, where something was bound that should not have been bound and will need to be unbound before the last act of this particular war is played out. Harry read it 3 times, memorized it, and put it carefully in his breast pocket. He went back downstairs. Snape was standing at the window, looking out at the dark grounds. He turned when Harry came in. "Find anything?" he said. "Some interesting reading material," Harry said. Snape looked at him. Then, very deliberately, he looked away. "The parley window closes in 20 minutes, he said. "You should leave." Harry picked up his wand from the table where he'd set it. He looked at Snape for a moment, at the back of him, the rigid controlled posture, the black robes in the amber light. "Professor," he said. Snape didn't turn. "When this is over," Harry said, "I'm going to need you to do something. I don't know what yet. But I'm going to need you to trust me the way I'm choosing to trust you right now." A pause. "I want you to know that when I ask, it won't be something I ask lightly." The silence lasted long enough that Harry thought Snape wasn't going to respond. Get out, Potter, Snape said. His voice was rough in a way that had nothing to do with anger. Harry left. Outside the gate, the night air hit him like cold water, and 3 figures stepped out of the tree line before he'd taken 10 paces. Daphne reached him first. She crossed the distance between the trees and him at a walk that was just short of running, and she stopped in front of him and did the full rapid assessment, eyes moving over him, checking, verifying, and then she breathed out once, a controlled exhale that she probably didn't mean for him to see, and stepped back. You were in there an hour and 40 minutes, she said. I know. The parley held, Hermione said, coming up behind, wand still out. I was monitoring for breaks. Nothing. Who was the representative? Snape. Hermione made a sharp sound. Ron said nothing, but his expression shifted through several things quickly. The proposal? Daphne said. Public neutrality in exchange for non-aggression. A propaganda move dressed up as a peace offer. Harry looked at her. I refused. Of course you did. Not surprised. Not even particularly relieved. Just factual. What else happened? He hesitated for just a moment. I searched the estate, he said. Ron looked at him. Hermione looked at him. Daphne looked at him with the particular expression of someone who has just had a hypothesis confirmed. You used the parley as cover to get access to the estate, she said. The parley covered the meeting. What's in the estate wasn't part of the parley. He authorized the location, not the house, she said. Exactly what I said. She was quiet for a long moment. In the dark her face was more open than it was in daylight, the composed mask less necessary when the audience was smaller. What did you find? He told them. All 3 of it, the journal, the pamphlet, the letter. When he got to the letter and described the ley line confluence and the thing that had been bound in northern Scotland, Hermione went very still. The Hill of the Seer, she said. You know it? It's a real place. I've read about it. It's in the Muggle historical record as a local name for a hill in the Cairngorms region. It's called Cregan na Fiann in Gaelic, the Crag of the Fianna, but the local English translation of an older name was sometimes given as Seer's Hill. She was rapid now, the excited velocity of someone connecting things. There's been recorded magical anomaly in that area for centuries. Muggles attribute it to folklore. If there's a ley line confluence there, something was bound there, Harry said. Before the First War. Possibly during it. A Horcrux? Ron said. Selwyn said it wasn't soul magic. Something different. Something that needs to be unbound before the last act can be played out. He looked at all 3 of them. I want to find it. Of course you do, Ron said, and this time it came out as acceptance rather than resignation. Daphne had her arms crossed, thinking, processing. The night was cold and the grounds around the Selwyn estate were dark and empty, the black mass of the yew hedges against the slightly lighter sky. There's something else, Harry said. He looked at Daphne specifically. Snape told me Voldemort will look for a pressure point. He named you. The composure held. Just, held. Of course he did, she said. I'm not telling you to frighten you. I know why you're telling me. We need to think about additional protections for the Greengrass estate. And Astoria specifically. Something moved across her face at her sister's name, fast and fierce and briefly unguarded. I'll contact my father tonight, she said. There are old family wards that haven't been fully activated since my mother died. He didn't want to, it requires a formal head of house ritual and he hasn't been, she stopped. He'll do it now. Tell him what I told you. All of it. I will. They stood in the cold Wiltshire dark, the 4 of them, the estate at their backs and the open countryside ahead, and it was the particular moment after something significant where the air hasn't settled back into ordinary yet. Ron said, quietly, we should move. He was right. They apparat back in pairs, Ron and Hermione first, and then Harry reached for Daphne's arm, and she was already there, her hand on his sleeve, and for a moment before they went they were standing very close in the dark. "You were careful," she said. Quietly. "I was." "You were also reckless," she said. "Searching the estate in the middle of a Death Eater parley." "I knew what I was doing." "I know you knew what you were doing. I'm saying it was still reckless." She looked up at him, and in the dark her eyes were very clear. "But it worked. And you found something real." A pause. "That's the maddening thing about you." "What is?" "It usually works," she said, and apparat them both before he could respond. Back at Hogwarts, in the corridor outside the library where they'd agreed to debrief before separating, the full weight of the evening settled. Hermione already had her notebook out. Ron was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, in the quiet alert state he moved into after serious situations, less active, but more focused, processing at his own pace. Daphne stood slightly apart, and her composure was back in full, the public version, but it sat differently now, less like a wall and more like clothing, something worn rather than something hiding behind. Harry looked at the three of them in the torchlit corridor. His people. Not the Order's people, not Dumbledore's people, not anyone's people but their own. "The ley line confluence," he said. "I want to find it before Voldemort realizes we know about it." "You think he doesn't know?" Hermione said. "Selwyn kept the letter sealed. If Voldemort knew about it, he'd have moved on it already." He paused. "It's something Selwyn held back. His own private research." "Which means whatever's there, Voldemort doesn't have it," Daphne said. "And if we can get there first, we change the shape of the endgame," she said. "Before the endgame is even defined." Her voice carried something that wasn't quite excitement, more like the focused satisfaction of a strategist watching a plan develop faster and better than expected. "Research first," Hermione said, firmly. "Cairngorms, ley line confluences, any recorded magical binding rituals from the First War period. I'll need a week at minimum." "You've got it." "And we tell no one else yet," Daphne said. "Not even Longbottom. Not until we understand what we're dealing with." "Agreed." "Also," she said, "I want to know more about anchor magic." Selwyn's journal. Harry blinked. He hadn't expected that specific thread to surface first. Why? Because if Voldemort didn't know about it and Selwyn was working on it independently, it means there's a branch of magical theory that the Death Eaters don't have access to. Her eyes were sharp. "That's a gap. Gaps are useful." Harry looked at her for a long, quiet moment. "I'll bring you the journal tomorrow," he said. She nodded. Turned to go. Stopped, half-turned. "Harry." He'd noticed, over the past 2 weeks, that she used his name only when she meant something she wasn't going to say any other way. "You did well tonight," she said. And then she was walking away down the corridor, her footsteps precise on the stone floor, her silver hair catching the torchlight. Ron watched her go, then turned to Harry with an expression that combined several things. "She's terrifying," he said, admiringly. "She really is," Harry agreed. "Also," Ron started. "Don't," Harry said. "I'm just saying, Ron. The way she said your name at the end there, Ron." "Right," Ron said cheerfully. "Bed, then." They went to bed, and the castle settled around them, and the night was quiet. Somewhere under a hill in northern Scotland, something waited to be found. Somewhere in whatever dark space he occupied, Voldemort was recalibrating, again, and the edges of his patience were fraying. And in the Gryffindor dormitory, Harry lay awake for a while looking at the ceiling, turning the letter over in his mind, "To whoever finds this after my death," and thinking about what it meant to leave something behind for someone you'd never meet, on the faith that they'd be ready for it when they arrived. He thought he might understand that impulse better than he used to. He closed his eyes. Chapter 5. The Fracture. The owl from Ron's mother arrived on a Monday morning and managed to be a howler and a letter simultaneously, which was a feat Harry hadn't known was possible. It wasn't screaming. Molly Weasley had clearly exercised significant restraint, possibly at Arthur's urging, but the parchment was red-edged and warm to the touch when Ron picked it up, and the handwriting had the pressed hard quality of someone writing with considerable force of feeling held firmly in check. Ron read it at the breakfast table with the expression of a man defusing something, and when he finished he folded it very precisely and put it in his pocket. Harry waited. "She wants me home," Ron said. "Not today. But, soon. She wants to talk. About me. About everything." Ron looked at his plate. "She knows about Saturday. She knows about the parley." His voice was even. "Dumbledore told the Order." Harry felt something cold move through him, not surprise. He'd expected this, had known Dumbledore would move on the parley information eventually, but the reality of it had a weight that expectation hadn't fully accounted for. He knew about the parley. "Apparently Snape reported it," Ron said. "Which he'd have to, wouldn't he? To maintain his cover." He paused. "But the way Mum writes, she's not angry about the parley itself. She's angry because Dumbledore told the Order that you went alone." "I didn't go alone." "I know that." Ron looked at him directly. "She doesn't know that. And the version Dumbledore gave the Order is that you went to meet a Death Eater representative without telling anyone, which in that version makes you sound reckless and dangerous," Harry said. "Yeah." The word soldier came back to him. The way Dumbledore had looked when he'd said it. Not anger, something more complicated. The response of a man who had made himself necessary by making others dependent, and was now watching that dependency dissolve and finding, perhaps, that its dissolution was the thing he'd feared most without admitting he feared anything. "He's moving on the Order," Harry said, quiet. "Shaping the narrative before I can." "That's what it looks like." Hermione had come in during this exchange, plate in hand, and had been listening with the alert attention of someone who arrived at most conversations slightly ahead of them. She sat down. "He'll tell them Snape reported you to him, not that Snape told you anything useful," she said. From the Order's perspective, a Harry Potter who goes to secret meetings with Death Eaters and comes back with a bag of old books is exactly the kind of thing they'd been warned to watch for. "He's not wrong to be concerned," Harry said. "Not defensively, just honestly." "He's wrong about how he's handling it," Hermione said, sharp and clear. "There's a difference between genuine concern and using genuine concern as a lever to pull you back into line." She paused. "He's also wrong about what you found." "If the ley line confluence is real, it's real," Harry said. "Hermione, it's real. You confirmed the location yourself." "I confirmed the Muggle historical record." "What's actually there?" She stopped herself. "I have 6 books pulled. I'll know more by Wednesday." A pause. "But that's not the problem today." "No," Harry said. "The problem today is the Order." The problem arrived in person at 4 o'clock in the form of Remus Lupin. Harry hadn't known he was coming, none of them had. Lupin appeared in the corridor outside the defense classroom at the end of the afternoon, looking the way he always looked, like something that had been through considerable weather and was holding up out of sheer stubbornness. The familiar shabby robes, the graying hair, the quality of worn-down warmth that was characteristic of him. He looked at Harry with the specific expression of someone who has been asked to do something they find difficult and who has decided to do it anyway because they believe it's right. "Do you have a few minutes?" Lupin said. "Yes," Harry said. There was no point in hedging. They found an empty classroom 2 doors down. Harry conjured chairs with the ease of practice. He'd been doing wandless minor conjuration since August, had been keeping it unremarkable because it was useful not to advertise everything, and they sat. Lupin noticed the wandless conjuration. His eyes registered it briefly, catalogued it, moved on with the precision of the excellent teacher he was. Dumbledore spoke to the Order last night, Lupin said. I know. He described Saturday's meeting in terms that weren't entirely, he stopped. Chose again. He emphasized the risk. He was less complete about the context. He told them I went alone. Lupin was quiet for a moment. He told them you went without Order authorization or support, he said, which was technically different and practically the same. Harry, I want to ask you directly, and I want you to answer me directly. Did Snape give you anything at that meeting beyond the proposal? Harry looked at him. Lupin's eyes were steady and careful and genuinely asking, not performing asking. This was the thing about Lupin, he was the one person in the Order, maybe the only one, who had consistently tried to see Harry rather than the chosen one, and the good faith in that was real enough that it deserved a real response. Yes, Harry said. What? He told me that Voldemort will look for a pressure point among the people around me. He named Daphne specifically. Lupin's expression moved. Snape warned you about a potential target. He also confirmed something about the prophecy. About what Dumbledore intended. He paused. About what Dumbledore was going to ask me to do. The classroom was very quiet. Afternoon light through the grimy windows, the smell of old chalk and stone. Lupin did not ask him what he meant. Which meant Lupin already knew. Harry watched that register on the man's face, the way the knowing settled in, visible and uncomfortable. The way a person looks when something they've been not quite letting themselves think about is suddenly in the room. He was going to let me die, Harry said. To destroy the piece of Voldemort's soul inside me. That's what the prophecy actually requires. That's what Dumbledore knew and didn't tell me. Harry, I'm not angry. He said it evenly and it was true. I understand why. I understand the logic. But I needed to know, and he wasn't going to tell me, and he found the word. That's the thing I can't forgive. Not the plan. The choice to keep me in the dark about my own life until the moment I was meant to walk into death. Lupin had gone very still. Did you know? Harry said. A long pause. Long enough to be its own answer. Not the full shape of it, Lupin said. His voice was rough. I suspected. I didn't ask because I didn't want to know, and he stopped. His jaw was tight. That was a failure on my part. I'm sorry, Harry. Harry looked at him. I know you are. I should have, you were grieving serious. You were dealing with your own situation. I'm not, he shook his head. That's not what I'm asking you for. What are you asking for? Harry leaned forward slightly. I'm asking you to stop carrying messages for Dumbledore's version of this story, and start deciding what you actually believe. Not what the Order believes. Not what Dumbledore needs the Order to believe. He paused. You know me. You've known me since I was 13. What do you actually think I'm doing? Lupin looked at him for a long time. The afternoon light shifted as a cloud crossed outside. The silence was the kind that has weight and texture. I think, Lupin said slowly, that you are doing something very dangerous, very fast, with more preparation than anyone has given you credit for. A pause. And I think you are genuinely trying to win rather than just survive. Yes. Those are different things. I know they are. Dumbledore planned to win by sacrificing me. I plan to win by not being sacrificed. He held the steady gaze. Those two plans can't coexist. Lupin was quiet. Something in him was moving, Harry could see it, the internal working of a man who had been defined by his loyalties for 20 years and was now being asked to look at them and choose deliberately rather than by habit. The Order is fracturing, Lupin said at last. Over this. Over you. Molly thinks you're being reckless and influenced by, she used the phrase dark elements, which I think she means the Greengrass Alliance. Daphne's family is neutral. Molly doesn't entirely distinguish between neutral and dark when the robes are green. He said it without endorsing it. Arthur is more measured. Tonks is angry at Dumbledore, actually, which has created some tension. A pause. Mad Eye thinks you're making intelligent moves and is furious that he can't say so publicly without undermining Albus. Harry almost smiled at that. It sounded exactly right. The fracture isn't something I caused, Harry said. It was already there. The Order was held together by a shared belief that Dumbledore had a complete plan. He doesn't. He had a plan that relied on me being willing to die for it, and I'm not. He stood. That's not a fracture I created. That's a fracture that was always underneath and I just stopped helping to cover it. Lupin stood also. He was taller than Harry, and the afternoon made him look older than his years, the gray in his hair catching the light. "What do you want from me?" he said. Quiet, direct. "Nothing specific right now," Harry said. "Just, stay available. And when I need to tell someone in the Order something that the Order needs to actually hear and not have filtered through Dumbledore's interpretation," he paused. "I'll come to you." Lupin looked at him for a long moment, and the thing in his expression was complicated, grief and admiration and the specific pain of watching someone you love grow into a size that means they no longer need you to hold anything up for them. "All right," he said. "Thank you, Remus." The use of his first name, something Harry almost never did, made Lupin's face do something brief and unguarded. He nodded, once, and they left the classroom. Daphne was waiting outside. Not in a pointed way, she was walking down the corridor with a stack of books under her arm, clearly coming from the library, but she timed her arrival in the way she always timed things, which was precisely. She glanced at Lupin as he passed, gave him the formal nod of someone who respects a person without knowing them well, and fell into step beside Harry. "How did it go?" she said, low. "Well, I think." He matched her pace. "He heard what I said. Whether he can act on it inside the Order structure, he will eventually. People who've been told hard truths don't unknow them." She shifted the books under her arm. "I've been in the library." "I know. You've been in the library since 6 this morning. Hermione told you. She mentioned you were there when she arrived at 6:30 and she was already late." Daphne's expression did the door-opening thing, fractional and warm. "Hermione is never late. She was this morning. She was trying to perfect the analysis before you got further ahead of her." That's very human of her." "She's very human," Harry said. "She just sometimes forgets." They turned a corner, moving toward the courtyard. The afternoon had cooled but wasn't dark yet, and the castle grounds through the arched windows were the deep amber of October pushing toward November. "The ley line confluence," Daphne said. She opened the top book as she walked, which was characteristic. "I found a reference in an obscure 1890s treatise on Scottish magical geography. The author refers to a site in the Cairngorms as a sealed confluence," his phrase, and notes that the sealing was performed during a period of significant dark magical activity in the area. She showed him the passage, marked with a careful strip of parchment. "He doesn't name the event. But the date he gives matches the First War," Harry said, reading the margin notation she'd made. "Or the period immediately before it. The late 1960s through mid-1970s. She closed the book. Voldemort was building power during exactly that period. If Selwyn was working with him, and if there was a ley line confluence in the Cairngorms that could anchor old magic, what would he have bound there?" Harry said. "That's what I've been trying to work out." She was quiet for a moment, and he could feel her thinking, the particular quality of attention she brought to a problem, thorough and systematic and not willing to stop until the shape was clear. "It's not a Horcrux. Selwyn was explicit about that. But anchor magic, based on the journal, which I spent 3 hours with last night, you were reading at 2 in the morning. I was reading until 4. Said without any particular drama. Anchor magic is about persistence. About making something that lasts beyond the individual. But Selwyn's theory goes further. He writes about using a ley line confluence to anchor not a thing but a condition. A magical state. Something that, once anchored, would affect the magical environment in its area indefinitely. Harry stopped walking. Daphne stopped with him. They were in the corridor near the courtyard door, and the amber light was falling through the glass in long panels across the stone floor. A condition, he said. A state of being, she said. Her voice was careful, precise, building to something. What if someone, in the late 1960s, before Voldemort was powerful enough to be certain of success, anchored something at that confluence that was designed to persist regardless of whether Voldemort survived? Something that would continue his work, in a sense, or create conditions favorable to it. Like a contingency, Harry said. A very old, very stable contingency. Bound to the land itself. She looked at him. If Selwyn built this and Voldemort didn't know about it, then it's still running, Harry said. 30 years. Operating in the background. The implications arranged themselves in his mind like cards being laid out, one by one. Something in the magical landscape of northern Scotland, operating for 30 years, creating conditions for dark magic or dark events or something. And Selwyn had left the letter for someone to find because he'd known, at the end, that it needed to be stopped. When can we go? He said. Not before Hermione finishes her research, Daphne said. We need to know what we're walking into. 3 days. Minimum. 3 days, he agreed. She started walking again. He walked beside her. They moved through the courtyard door into the amber afternoon, and the air was cold and clean, and above the castle the sky was the deep blue that comes before the purple that comes before the dark. The letter from Cyrus Greengrass arrived at dinner. Not at the table, it was waiting in Daphne's dormitory when she returned from dinner, left by a private owl that knew the window. She came to find Harry in the common room at 8 with the letter in her hand and an expression that was controlled in a way that told him immediately the control was doing considerable work. He took one look at her and stood. Common room's too busy, he said. Come on. They found an empty classroom off the 5th floor corridor. He was becoming very familiar with Hogwarts' empty classroom geography, and he locked the door with a quick charm and turned. She unfolded the letter without preamble and read the relevant section aloud, her voice staying even. Ministry property surveyors attended the Greengrass estate this morning without prior notice, citing the wartime survey provision I understand was filed by one Edmund Cull. Your mother's garden was inspected without permission and 2 of the old wards in the East Wing were assessed for quote, compliance review. The survey team's paperwork was irregular and I have filed formal objection with the Wisengamot clerk's office. However, Astoria was present for part of the survey and was, she stopped. The word stopped. Harry waited. She was frightened, Daphne said. The composure held but it was holding the way ice holds, under pressure. My father says she was frightened and she didn't want him to see it. Is she all right? She's fine. Daphne folded the letter carefully, precise folds, the way she handled things when her hands wanted to do something and she was giving them the controlled version. She hid it because she didn't want my father to worry. She's 14 years old and she was frightened in her own house by ministry surveyors and she hid it so my father wouldn't worry. Her voice had gone very quiet. She does that. She's done it since she was 6. Harry sat on the edge of the nearest desk. He didn't move toward her. He read the situation correctly enough to know that proximity wasn't what this needed. She needed to be angry and she needed space to be angry without anyone trying to absorb it on her behalf. Call moved faster than we thought, he said. He didn't expect me to have connections in the ministry filing system, Daphne said. The anger was finding its shape now, sharp and focused. He assumed he could use the property survey quietly without us getting advance notice. The fact that he moved anyway, even after the Wisengamot hearing, he's not operating alone. No, Harry said. Someone above him told him to move. He doesn't have the confidence for this on his own. The minister's office, she said. Or someone with access to it. He thought for a moment. The prophecy registry angle, Hermione shut that down before he could file it. The asset designation, closed in the chamber. The property survey was his third move in 2 weeks. He's being pushed. Someone wants the alliance broken. She was pacing, controlled and even, the way she did everything. If my father loses confidence, if the cost to the Greengrass family starts outweighing the benefit, your father said he wouldn't break an alliance over a pressure memo, Harry said. That was before ministry surveyors walked into Astoria's house and frightened her. She stopped pacing. He'll hold. He's not a man who breaks commitments. But it won't be comfortable, and if there's another move before we respond, then we respond now, Harry said. We don't wait for the next move. She looked at him. What does your father need? He said. Concretely. Right now. She thought about it, precise and rapid. The formal objection he's filed with the Wisengamot clerk will take 2 weeks to be scheduled. Too slow. He needs immediate acknowledgement. That the Potter House seat sees the survey as a breach and is formally noting it. She paused. And he needs the survey voided. Not the objection upheld later, voided now. The survey was filed under wartime provision, Harry said. But the Greengrass estate is subject to the betrothal alliance protections, which were registered the same week. Any property action against a house in a registered betrothal alliance requires the consent of the other house. He stood. Call filed the survey without checking the alliance register. Which means the survey itself is procedurally invalid. Daphne was very still. He didn't check the register. The register was updated the morning after the Wisengamot bulletin. If he was operating off old filings, he was in a hurry, she said. He was being pushed and he moved without doing the complete preparation. Something in her expression shifted, the anger reforming into something colder and more useful. We can have the survey voided tonight. I'll write to Augusta Longbottom, Harry said. She has standing to file an emergency Wisengamot motion. She'll do it, Daphne said. She was looking for something to do with the access she's been offering. Harry crossed to the desk and pulled parchment from his bag. He wrote the letter to Augusta in 5 minutes, direct and complete, the procedural grounds, the alliance register discrepancy, the request for an emergency motion. He sealed it and had it in the air via School Owl 10 minutes after that. Then he wrote a second letter. To Cyrus Greengrass, direct, explaining the procedural grounds, explaining that the survey would be voided, and asking how Astoria was. He hesitated over the last part. Then he kept it in. Daphne was reading over his shoulder as he wrote. When he sealed the second letter she was quiet for a moment. You asked about her, she said. Yes. A pause. You keep doing that. I know. Most people who want something from an alliance, from a family, she stopped. They don't ask about the people on the edges. They're not relevant to the transaction. She's not on the edge to you, Harry said. So she's not on the edge to me. Daphne was behind him and he couldn't see her face. He heard her exhale once, not the controlled one she used for emotion management, but a real one, quiet and slightly unsteady. The ley line, she said, after a moment. Back to business, but the quality of the air in the room had changed. When we go, whatever's there, the anchor magic, the bound condition, it's going to be dangerous. Yes. I want to come. I assumed you would. Don't assume, she said, and it had that precise edge. I'm telling you. I'm not staying behind because it's dangerous. He turned around. She was standing 2 feet from him and her expression was the fully direct one, the one he'd started to understand meant she was saying the actual thing rather than the version she'd prepared. I'm not going to ask you to stay behind, he said. Not because of danger. If I thought you couldn't handle what's there, I'd tell you, and we'd have a disagreement about it, and you'd probably be right. He paused. But you can handle it. So you're coming. Something in her settled. Not relief, she didn't do relief in any conventional sense, but resolution. The kind of internal settling that happens when a thing you needed to be true is confirmed. All right, she said. They were standing fairly close. The classroom was quiet, the torches casting their unsteady warm light over the stone walls, and the letter to Augusta was already on its way, and the survey was as good as voided, and the situation was in hand. He was aware of the closeness. He was also aware, suddenly, that she was aware of it, and neither of them was doing anything to increase or decrease the distance, which was its own kind of statement. You should go back, she said. The common room curfew is in 40 minutes, he said. And I'm a head of house with a Waisengemot seat. The prefect system has limited jurisdiction over me at this point. She almost laughed. It wasn't quite a laugh, but it was the closest thing to one he'd seen from her, a short exhalation with a warmth to it that transformed her face completely for the half-second it lasted. That's genuinely the most Slytherin thing you've ever said, she told him. I've been learning from good sources. She looked at him. The door-opening expression held slightly longer than usual. Go back to your common room, she said, and it was gentle rather than dismissive. We have 3 days before we go north. I want you rested. You want me rested. Someone should be, she said, which he suspected was the closest she was going to get to admitting that she herself hadn't been sleeping much. He picked up his bag and moved to the door. Daphne. She looked at him. Tell your father Astoria can come stay at Hogwarts if he thinks it's safer, he said. She's 14, she's technically eligible for school trips and extended stays. I can talk to McGonagall. She looked at him for a long, quiet moment. I'll tell him, she said. Augusta's response arrived the next morning before breakfast. It was characteristic of her, 3 sentences confirming she'd received the letter, 2 sentences confirming the procedural grounds were solid, 1 sentence saying the emergency motion was filed at 11 the previous night and would be ruled on by morning, and a postscript that read, Call made a careless mistake. In my experience, careless mistakes from men who are not careless are a sign of pressure from above. Find out who is above him. Harry read it twice, handed it to Daphne, who read it once and handed it back with a look that said I already thought of this. The motion was upheld by 9 o'clock. The property survey was voided. A formal notation was entered in the Waisengemot record that any future property action against a house in a registered betrothal alliance required alliance consent. Call would know by noon. Whoever was above Call would know by early afternoon. Ron found Harry at lunch. Not the usual way, not sliding into the seat beside him with a plate piled high, but coming to find him in the corridor outside the Great Hall with the deliberate quality of someone who has made a decision and is walking toward it. Mum's coming to Hogwarts, Ron said. McGonagall gave permission for a family visit. She'll be here Thursday. I know, Harry said. McGonagall told me this morning. She wanted me to have the notice. Ron nodded. She's going to want to talk to you directly. I know that too. I'm not. I want you to know that I haven't told her anything she shouldn't know. I haven't told her about Saturday, or the ley line, or any of the, I haven't. He said it seriously, the particular seriousness of Ron when something matters. But I can't stop her coming. I wouldn't want you to, Harry said. She's your mum. She loves you. Of course she's coming. Ron looked at him. The corridor around them was briefly empty, students filtering into the hall for lunch, the 2 of them in the relative quiet of the doorway. She's going to try to pull you back into the order framework, Ron said. She's going to use the personal version, not political, not strategic. She's going to be a mum about it. She's very good at being a mum about things. I know. Are you? He stopped. Can you be? I don't want you to be cruel to her. Even if you have to say no. Harry looked at his best friend's face, at the complicated love there, the worry for both sides of it, the loyalty that was genuinely trying to hold two things at once. Ron, he said. She's the nearest thing to a mother I've ever had. I know exactly what I owe her and I'm not going to forget it, even if I can't give her what she wants. He paused. I'll be kind. I promise. Ron breathed out. Right, he said. Good. And then, after a pause, also Hermione's been up since 5 and she says she found something important about the ley line and she's going to combust if she doesn't tell someone, so you might want to get there before she actually combusts. Hermione's discovery, delivered at full research velocity at the library table at 1 o'clock with 4 books, 2 maps, and a rolled piece of parchment with diagrams, was this: the ley line confluence in the Cairngorms was not just a confluence. It was a nexus, a point where 3 ley lines met, which in standard magical geography occurred roughly twice per continent and was considered significant. But this nexus had an additional property she'd found in a 1912 survey by a magical cartographer named Elspeth Monroe, who had described the site as a resonant nexus, a confluence whose 3 lines were in harmonic alignment, which apparently happened at specific nexuses approximately once every century. Harmonic alignment means the magic at that point isn't just amplified, Hermione said, pointing at her diagram. It's synchronized. Any magic anchored at a harmonic nexus doesn't just persist, it strengthens over time. The 3 lines reinforce each other in a cycle. So whatever Selwyn bound there in the 1960s, Harry said, has been getting stronger for 30 years, she finished. It's not a bomb. It's more like, she searched for the analogy. Like a tide that's been coming in for 3 decades. Slowly. Below the threshold of notice. But the water level is considerably higher than it was. What's the effect? Daphne said. She was leaning over the map, tracing the ley lines with a precise fingertip. That's what I can't fully identify yet, Hermione admitted. The anchor condition, whatever Selwyn actually bound, I need the journal. I've been working from second-hand references. Harry pulled Selwyn's journal from his bag and set it on the table. Hermione looked at it the way she looked at most important texts, with a reverence that was, in her case, completely sincere. How long have you had this here? Since Saturday. You had it in your bag for 3 days. I gave Daphne the first read. I've been working from secondary sources, Harry, the secondary sources were important, give me the journal. She had it. She was already turning pages. The 3 of them watched her for a moment, Ron with the fond resignation of long familiarity, Daphne with a slight smile that she wasn't quite managing to suppress, Harry with affection and a certain awe that had never entirely diminished in 6 years. We go Saturday, Harry said, to the group. Friday night, Daphne said, without looking up from the map. If we leave late Friday, we arrive before dawn Saturday. The nexus, based on Monroe's survey, will be most accessible at dawn. The harmonic cycle peaks at sunrise. You read Monroe, Harry said. I found the same survey at 11 last night, she said. We converged on the same source independently. A pause. Hermione would have found it by this afternoon. I found it this morning, Hermione said, not looking up from the journal. I know, Daphne said. I checked the library's request log. Hermione looked up. She looked at Daphne. A moment passed between them, not quite the same as the moment Hermione and Ron communicated in, but something adjacent to it. The moment of 2 highly intelligent people recognizing each other. I haven't thanked you for the prophecy registry research you sent me, Daphne said. It was excellent. Hermione blinked. Her expression did something complicated. It was, she stopped. Thank you, she said, and it came out straightforward and real. Your analysis of the Wisengamot member bulletin system was thorough. I wouldn't have thought to access it that way. Another moment. Friday night, Ron said, to no one in particular. He was looking between Hermione and Daphne with the expression of a man witnessing something he doesn't quite have words for. So we've got 3 days. I assume there's homework. There's always homework, Hermione said, and returned to the journal. Thursday arrived like a held breath. Molly Weasley came at 2 in the afternoon, shown to a private sitting room off the McGonagall's office by a house elf, and Harry went alone. He'd told Ron to stay out of it, not to protect himself, but to protect Ron from having to stand in the middle of it. She was sitting in the smaller of the 2 chairs when he arrived, and she stood when he came in, and for a moment they just looked at each other. She was exactly as he remembered, the warmth that came off her like heat from a fire, the worry worn openly on her face, the way she wore everything openly, the particular fierce love of her that had sheltered him at every turn since he was 11 years old. She looked older. The last year had done something to all of them, but on Molly it was visible in the lines around her eyes, the gray that had come into her red hair. The war was real and it was touching everything, and she was a mother and she was afraid, and Harry understood all of that completely. Harry, she said. Molly, he said, and he crossed the room and hugged her, properly, because it was true and it was right and none of the difficulty between them changed the truth of what she'd given him. She held on for a moment, and then pulled back and looked at him, and her eyes were bright, and she sat down and he sat across from her. You should have told someone, she said. It was gentle and direct simultaneously, which was her particular gift. I know, he said. Some of the choices I made about how to do this, I'd do differently if I could. But not the choices themselves. She looked at him. The Greengrass girl, Daphne, he said. Same as he'd said to Dumbledore, same as he'd said to Cyrus, and it meant the same thing each time. She's a person, use her name. Molly paused. Registered it. Daphne, she said. Her family is neutral and has been for 2 generations, Harry said. Her father signed the betrothal documents after a formal meeting. He's a good man. He paused. Daphne is, he found the right words. She's the sharpest person I've ever worked with. She's been in every significant decision since this started. She's not a piece in a game, she's the person I trust most with the complicated parts. Molly looked at him for a long moment. You care about her, she said. Not quite a question. The observation of a woman who had watched love take shape in her household many times. Harry didn't answer that directly. I care what happens to her, he said, which was its own kind of answer. Molly was quiet. The room was warm, a fire in the small hearth, the ordinary domestic smell of someone who'd brought biscuits in a tin and hadn't offered them yet because the conversation was still finding its footing. Dumbledore, she said. He's wrong about the endgame, Harry said, simply. He was going to let me die. I don't think he's a bad man and I don't think he was wrong to try to stop Voldemort and I'm not going to fight him. But I'm not walking into the plan he built for me. Her face went through several things at the word die. She opened her mouth. It's true, Harry said, gently. And I think somewhere, you knew. Not specifically. But the shape of it. Her eyes closed for a moment. When she opened them they were wet but her voice was steady. He's asked so much, she said. Not defending Dumbledore, working through it in real time. He always has a reason. The reason always sounds right. I know, Harry said. He's very good at reasons. She looked at him, really looked, the way she had when he was 11 and had arrived on her platform looking lost. What are you going to do? Win, he said. Without being sacrificed for it. She reached out and took his hand, which she hadn't done since he was 12. Her grip was firm and real. If anything happens to my children, she said. Any of them. She looked at him, and he was in the category, and they both knew it. You come to me. Whatever you've decided about Dumbledore and the Order, you come to me. I will, he said. And he meant it. She stayed for an hour. She offered him the biscuits. She talked about Arthur's new project at work and Fred and George's shop, which was apparently doing extraordinary business, and she asked about his classes, and by the time she left the conversation had moved, the way good ones do, from the hard thing in the center to the ordinary things around it, which were what made the hard thing worth fighting for. She hugged him again at the door, long and firm. "Be careful," she said. "Be so careful." "I will," he said. She left. He stood in the empty sitting room for a moment, with the fire and the tin of biscuits and the afternoon light, and he was glad she'd come, and he was sad for the shape of things, and he was clear and settled and ready, and those things all existed at once without any of them canceling the others. Friday came and they went north. The four of them left through the Hogsmeade apparition point at 11 at night, the castle behind them, the darkness of Scotland around them, the stars very bright and very cold above. Harry looked up at them once before they disapparated. Daphne was standing beside him. Not touching, not speaking, just there, in the dark, looking the same direction he was looking. "Ready?" he said. "Yes," she said. They went. Chapter 6. The New War. The Cairngorms at midnight were not what any of them had expected. Harry had been outdoors in darkness many times, the grounds at Hogwarts, the moors near the Dursleys, the cold open space of the graveyard that still lived in the back of his mind as a reference point for genuine fear. But there was something in this particular darkness that was different in quality. The mountains rose around them as shapes rather than objects, enormous and close, and the sky above was the most stars he'd ever seen, thick and unbroken, the Milky Way visible as a physical presence, a river of pale light across the black. The air was so cold and clean it hurt to breathe. They'd landed in a shallow glen, frost on the grass, a burn running somewhere nearby that he could hear but not see. The darkness was total except for the stars. Hermione produced a low light immediately, not a wand tip, but a diffuse, controlled glow that lit the ground around them without reaching far, the kind of thing she'd practiced for exactly this kind of situation. Ron was already scanning the perimeter. Daphne stood very still with her eyes closed, which Harry had learned meant she was listening and feeling rather than looking, running some internal assessment he didn't fully understand but had come to trust. "North-northeast," she said, after 30 seconds. "About half a mile. The pole is significant." She opened her eyes. "You can feel it if you're paying attention. A kind of current." Harry extended his own awareness. "There, yes. Something pulling at the edge of magical sense, like a tide he'd been standing in without noticing. Not hostile, not threatening. Just enormous and old and patient." "Current is right," he said. "The nexus will be visible at dawn," Hermione said, checking the narrow almanac she'd tucked in her bag. "We have 6 hours. We should move to the site and assess the perimeter before the light." They moved through the glen in a loose formation, Hermione navigating by compass and memory, Daphne staying beside Harry with the particular quality of presence she had in the field, precise and quiet, conserving everything for what mattered. Ron moved at the back with a fluid, easy alertness that Harry appreciated deeply. He'd become very good at this kind of thing over the last 2 years, not through bravado but through paying attention, and in the dark of the Scottish mountains that quality was worth considerably more than flash. The hill announced itself by the way the ground changed beneath their feet. At roughly a quarter-mile out, the frost on the grass stopped. Not gradually, a visible line, clear even in the dark, where the frozen grass gave way to something warmer. Not warm exactly, but not cold. The temperature differential was enough to make Harry's breath stop misting. "Anchor effect," Daphne said, low. "The bound magic is creating a microclimate." 30 years, Ron said. 30 years of harmonic amplification, Hermione confirmed. The energy has been building up in the local environment, affecting it. The hill was modest by Scottish standards, a rounded, dark mass against the star-filled sky, not dramatic in itself. But as they got closer Harry could feel the quality of the air around it thickening, the pull he'd noticed in the glen becoming less like a current and more like a gravity. Something was here. Something substantial. They stopped at roughly 50 feet from the base of the hill. Hermione ran a careful detection sweep. Harry watched the shimmer of the charms move outward and return, reading their color. There are 8 separate wards, she said, reading the results. But they're old. Original casting, never renewed. 3 of them are already failing. 2 more are partial. She looked up. Selwyn died before he could maintain them. Can we get through? Ron said. The remaining active wards are, she paused, studying the return more carefully. Fascinating. They're not defensive wards. They're containing wards. They're not meant to keep people out. They're meant to keep the anchor in. Daphne looked at Harry. Selwyn contained what he'd built, she said. He bound it and then warded the site to prevent it from expanding. He built a contingency and then changed his mind, Harry said. Or was killed before he could dismantle it. She looked at the hill. The wards have been failing for 30 years. Which means whatever the anchor condition was, has been slowly leaking, Hermione said, and her voice had the careful quality of someone managing alarm. Into the surrounding area. A slow magical contamination. She was quiet for a moment. That's why Monroe's 1912 survey noted the resonance anomaly. The site was already unusual before Selwyn, but after, it would have been significantly more so. What does the contamination do? Harry said. I won't know until we're inside the wards and I can read the anchor itself, Hermione said. But given what Selwyn was working on, a magical condition anchored to persist and strengthen, my best hypothesis is that it creates an environmental enhancement for dark magic. Not a weapon. A ground condition. Fertile ground. Harry looked at the hill and thought about 30 years of dark magic having better ground to grow in. He thought about the First War and the way it had spread so quickly, and the 10 years of uneasy peace that had still been full of fear and damage, and the way the Second War had risen from that fear like something that had been waiting in the soil. We're taking it apart, he said. It wasn't a question. That's considerably more complicated than it sounds, Hermione said. We need to understand the anchor structure before we dismantle it. If we break it wrong, we do it right, then, Harry said. How long? If we have until dawn, for 5 hours, and if I can get inside the perimeter and read the original casting, she was calculating. It's possible. It'll depend on what Selwyn actually anchored. Tell me what you need. To get through the remaining wards cleanly. One of them is a warding class I've studied, the old boundary charm variant. I can handle that. The second I'm less certain about. She paused. The third is a blood ward, I think. Selwyn's blood. That's the difficult one. Blood wards dissolve with the bloodline, Daphne said, moving to stand beside Hermione and look at the detection results. Selwyn died in the First War. If the ward is tied to his blood and he's dead, it should be defunct, Hermione said. But it's showing as active. Because the harmonic nexus is sustaining it, Daphne said. The ley line energy is powering the wards along with the anchor. The nexus is keeping the whole system running. A pause. So we need to reduce the nexus's input before the blood ward will fail, Harry said. Or circumvent it, Daphne said. She turned to Harry. Give me 10 minutes. She walked to the edge of the ward perimeter and knelt in the frost-free grass with a focus that closed the world outside of it entirely, and from her bag she produced Selwyn's journal, which she'd been annotating for 3 days, every margin dense with her small precise writing. Harry stood beside Ron and watched her work. She's something else, Ron said, quiet. Yeah, Harry said. I mean technically. The way I was watching her at the Wisengamot and at the Parley debrief and he paused, searching for the word. She's always 3 steps ahead and she makes it look like 1. She doesn't sleep enough, Harry said. It's how she stays 3 steps ahead. You notice when she doesn't sleep. Harry didn't answer that. Right, Ron said. Ron. I'm not saying anything. You're implying something. I'm implying nothing. I'm simply observing that you notice her sleep habits. He paused 1 beat. Which is very caring of you. Very, alliancy. I will hex you on a ley line nexus and feel fine about it. Ron smiled, said nothing, and went back to scanning the perimeter. 8 minutes later, Daphne stood up. The Blood Ward has a secondary trigger clause, she said, returning to them. Selwyn built in a dissolution command, a spoken phrase in Old Welsh. If he needed to dismantle the wards himself, he could do it without blood. She paused. He wrote it in the journal. Page 47, margin note, in a cipher he probably thought was obscure. A very slight tone. It wasn't. What's the phrase? Hermione said. Daphne said it. 6 words in Old Welsh, precise and correct, with the particular quality she brought to everything she committed to doing, completely, without half measure. Hermione ran another detection sweep. The shimmer moved outward and came back, and 2 of the 3 color signatures had changed. Blood Ward is down, Hermione said. The other 2 will yield to direct approach. She looked at Harry. Ready? He looked at the 4 of them, Hermione with her almanac and her analysis and her absolute forensic brilliance, Ron with his wand and his steady reliable courage, Daphne with her journal and her 3 days of preparation and her eyes in the dark that saw 3 steps ahead and made it look like 1. Let's go, he said. Inside the wards, the hill was transformed. The grass was green, genuinely green, in November, under a sky full of stars, and the temperature was what it would be on a spring morning. The air tasted of ozone and something older. At the hill's crest, 3 stones were arranged in a formation that was simultaneously simple and obviously meaningful, each one roughly head height, positioned to mark the convergence points of the 3 ley lines. Between them, visible now only because they were inside the containing wards, a faint, slow luminescence pulsed in the ground itself, deep blue-white, the color of something very old and very sure of itself. Hermione made a sound. Not words, just the sound of someone for whom beauty and terror have just arrived simultaneously and are both equally valid responses. The anchor is in the central stone, Daphne said. She was reading the magic directly now, the way people with particular sensitivity could, her eyes slightly unfocused. The working is extraordinary. Selwyn was genuinely brilliant. The anchor is structured like a, she searched for the analogy. Like a tuning fork. It's set to resonate with the ley lines, and the resonance amplifies the conditioned magic and broadcasts it outward. It's been running continuously. The condition, Harry said. What is it? Hermione was already at the central stone, both hands on its surface, reading the embedded magic with a focused intensity that she would have needed several additional years to apply to anything simpler. Her eyes were moving rapidly. She stopped. Continued. It's a despair anchor. That's the closest term. Selwyn embedded a magical condition that, he amplified naturally occurring fear and hopelessness in the surrounding area. It doesn't create the emotions. It magnifies what's already there. Finds the existing cracks and, her voice tightened. Widens them. The silence that followed had a particular weight. Harry thought about 2 wars. He thought about the 10 years in between when the fear had never quite left. He thought about villages where people still locked their doors and watched their neighbors and didn't trust and didn't recover. He thought about the Dursleys' hatred of anything magical and whether that hatred had felt, over the years, oddly disproportionate even for Muggles who'd had a bad shock. He thought about the graveyard and the specific quality of hopelessness that had settled over everything in the 2 years after that night, the way it had spread, the way it hadn't lifted the way it should have. He weaponized despair, Harry said. He optimized conditions for Voldemort's work, Daphne said, quietly. You don't need to tell people to be afraid. You don't need to manufacture the darkness. You just make the soil better for it. And then you wait. Ron said, very quietly, that's evil. Yes, Harry said. Let's take it apart. It took 3 hours and 40 minutes. Hermione led, which was right, this was her domain, the precise theoretical architecture of magical dismantling, the careful identification of which thread pulled first without collapsing the structure. She talked as she worked, not to explain to them but because working through it aloud was part of her process, and they listened and handed her what she needed, and Daphne spotted the structural flaw in the resonance loop that Hermione had been approaching from the wrong angle, and the course correction took 12 minutes instead of the 45 it would have taken otherwise. Ron maintained the perimeter the entire time. Not flashy, not dramatic. Just steady, and present, and watching the dark beyond the ward line with the reliable attention that Harry had learned years ago was worth more than any amount of talent deployed inconsistently. Twice, something moved beyond the wards. Once, a large dark shape that resolved, on closer inspection, into a red deer stag, which stood at the perimeter for a long moment looking at Harry with the large, liquid dark eyes of its kind before moving away into the dark. Harry watched it go and felt something he didn't have immediate words for, something old and familiar and not quite explicable. The second time was not a deer. A figure, outside the ward line, appearing from nowhere in the way that apparition produced, just present, suddenly, where nothing had been. Harry had his wand up before the figure had taken a breath. Easy, said Lupin's voice, from the dark. It's me. Harry lowered his wand. Ron did not, immediately, which was correct. How did you find us? Harry said. Lupin moved to the ward edge, stopping there, respectful of the boundary. He looked slightly out of breath. Augusta Longbottom, he said. She told me about the ley line research. She thought, he paused. She thought someone from the order should be present. Not to interfere. Present. Augusta sent you, Harry said. She said, and I'm quoting directly, someone who has enough sense to witness rather than meddle. He looked at Harry, and the starlight was enough to see his expression, the genuine quality of it. She was right that I'm the best candidate for that. Harry studied him for a moment. Then looked at Ron, who lowered his wand. Stay outside the perimeter, Harry said to Lupin. When this is done I'll explain everything. Lupin nodded. I'll wait. Harry turned back to the stones and the soft blue-white pulse in the ground and Hermione's voice continuing its careful, methodical working. The anchor came apart at dawn. Not dramatically, not an explosion, not a magical cataclysm. It came apart the way something that has been under enormous stress finally releases, a clean, quiet, total letting go. The luminescence in the ground between the stones simply faded. Over perhaps 30 seconds, the blue-white pulse slowed and dimmed and then was gone, and the ground between the stones was just ground, frost returning in the growing morning light, the spring warmth of the contained area cooling rapidly toward the actual November temperature. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. Harry stood at the center of the 3 stones and breathed in the new air and tried to identify what had changed. Something had. The pull he'd felt from half a mile out was gone, not reduced, gone, completely, like a sound that had been so constant you'd stopped registering it until it stopped. And what replaced it was just, the mountain, and the cold, and the enormous wide-open sky going from black to deep blue to the first pale suggestion of light in the east. Hermione sat down on the grass. Not carefully, not gracefully, she just sat, all at once, and she looked at the space where the anchor had been and she breathed. Ron sat beside her. Daphne was standing at one of the outer stones, hand on its surface, and her eyes were closed again, and in the growing light Harry could see her expression clearly, not composed, not armored. Just herself, in the quiet of it, the relief and the satisfaction and the particular stillness of someone who has done a very difficult thing and knows it. He walked to her. She opened her eyes when she heard him come. The light was coming faster now, the sky lightening rapidly the way it does at dawn in high places, and her face in it was real. Completely real. No performance, no layers. "It's gone," she said. "Yes. 30 years. Gone now." She looked at the space between the stones. "How many people's lives were shaped by that thing without anyone knowing," she said. "How many people felt despair that didn't entirely belong to them, that was amplified by this?" She stopped. "How do you even begin to account for that?" "You can't," Harry said. "You just stop it from going further." She looked at him. "You're very steady about things that should be enormous." "I've had a lot of practice at enormous things." "I know you have." She turned fully toward him, and they were close again, the way they'd been in the Wiltshire dark, the way they kept finding themselves, and the dawn was coming up fast behind her and the mountain was going from black to grey to the first warm colors of early light. "I want to say something." "Go ahead." "The arrangement," she said. "The terms I set in September." She paused, choosing carefully. "I said when this was over, I choose what happens next. That I could walk away. I remember." I want to revise that clause," she said. "Not because the arrangement is over. It's not. But because I want to stop calling it an arrangement." She held his eyes. "I've been calling it that because it was useful, but I've known for a while that it's not what it actually is, and continuing to call it that is inaccurate, and I'm precise about words, and I don't like saying inaccurate things." Harry was very still. "What is it actually?" he said. "Something I chose," she said. "Not the betrothal claim you gave me. Not the alliance. What I chose is, you. The person who asks about Astoria and searches estates during parleys and uses his first name back at you when you call him by his last." A pause. "That's what I chose. I wanted you to know." He looked at her in the growing light, and the mountain was turning amber and gold behind her, and 30 years of despair had just been pulled out of the ground at their feet, and there were still wars to fight and pieces to move and dark things in the dark. He reached up and tucked a strand of silver pale hair behind her ear, which the wind had pulled loose, and she didn't move away, and he leaned forward and kissed her, once, properly, with the mountain at dawn bearing witness and the cold clean air around them and the ley lines running silent and neutral and no longer weaponized below their feet. She kissed him back. It lasted a moment. When they separated she was looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen before, open, and warm, and entirely undefended, and still fully, utterly herself. "Inaccurate words corrected," he said. "Adequately," she said, which from her was everything. Lupin was sitting on a rock outside the ward line when they came out. He looked at all four of them, at the changed quality of the air, at the stones behind them, at Harry and Daphne side by side in a way that was new and not being concealed, and he said nothing about any of it, just stood. "Tell me," he said. Harry told him. All of it, the anchor, the despair condition, the 30 years of harmonic amplification, the dismantling. Lupin listened with the expression of a man absorbing a series of large truths that are rearranging his understanding of events he'd lived through. When Harry finished, Lupin was quiet for a long time. "The First War," he said finally. "The way it spread so fast. The way people," he stopped. "The way hope kept failing even when there was real reason for it." He looked at the hill. "Serious," he stopped again. "It didn't cause anything," Harry said, gently but directly. "It amplified what was already there. People made choices. Voldemort made choices. Those are real, regardless of the ground conditions." "I know," Lupin said. "But it's a different shape, when you know about this." "Yes. I know." Lupin looked at him. "You're going to tell the Order." "I'm going to tell everyone," Harry said. "The Order, the Wisengamot, the public. Not the full technical detail, Hermione will prepare the appropriate summary for each audience. But the fact of it, yes. People deserve to know that this was done, and that it's been undone. He paused. It also changes Voldemort's landscape. He's been operating with better conditions than he knew. Those conditions are gone. He'll know something's changed, Lupin said. He'll feel the shift. Yes. Which means the next move comes faster than it might have. Harry looked out at the mountain, fully gold now in the early sun, extraordinary and enormous and completely indifferent to all of them. Good. I'm ready for the next move. They operated back to Hogsmeade in the mid-morning, exhausted and cold and thoroughly alive. McGonagall was waiting at the gate. Not with anger, she was past the performance of anger with Harry at this point, they'd moved through to something more honest and more mutual. She looked at all four of them with the assessing sweep, determined they were physically intact, and said, "The headmaster wants to see you." "I know," Harry said. "I'll be there this afternoon." She paused. "He received a letter this morning. I don't know the contents, but his response suggested it was significant." "What kind of significant?" "The kind that makes a man look old," she said, simply, and stood aside to let them through. The headmaster's office at 2 in the afternoon had the quality of a place where something irreversible had recently occurred. Dumbledore was behind his desk, and the silver instruments were still, and Fawkes was in full plumage, brilliant crimson and gold, which Harry had learned meant the bird was in a heightened state, attentive to something in the magical atmosphere. Dumbledore looked at Harry when he came in, and there was no twinkle at all, and what was in its place was the full unguarded face of the man, old and brilliant and genuinely troubled, the face he wore when he was not performing anything. "Sit down, Harry," he said. The use of his first name this time had a different weight. Harry sat. He was tired from the night, but it was clean tired, not depleted. "What happened?" he said. "I received correspondence this morning from a source I will not name publicly, who informed me that the ley line nexus in the Cairngorms was dismantled in the early hours of today." He looked at Harry. "You were there?" "Yes." "All four of you?" "Yes." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. "I knew about the nexus," he said. Harry went still. "Not initially. I became aware of it in the late 1970s, during the final stages of the First War. By then it had been operating for over a decade and he paused, and the pause carried considerable weight. I made a decision that dismantling it would require exposing my knowledge of it, which would expose certain intelligence assets. I chose to leave it." He met Harry's eyes. "That was a mistake. I've known for some time that it was a mistake, and I did not act to correct it." "Because you were waiting for the right moment," Harry said. "It came out without judgment, just accurate." "Because I am a man who waits for right moments," Dumbledore said, "and that is sometimes wisdom and sometimes its opposite." He breathed out. "You went and you dismantled it in one night. Without ministry authorization, without order oversight, without asking permission," Harry said. A pause. "Without asking permission," Dumbledore agreed. "Did it need to be dismantled?" "Yes." "Then the permission question is secondary." Dumbledore looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Outside the office windows the November sky was blue and enormous. Fawkes ruffled his feathers softly. "I owe you an accounting," Dumbledore said. It landed in the room with a weight that was genuine and unperformed. "Not a conversation in which I explain my reasoning. An actual accounting. Of the things I've done and not done and the choices I made regarding you specifically." He paused. "I'd like to offer that, if you're willing to receive it." Harry looked at him. He thought about the graveyard and the Department of Mysteries and the word sacrifice in a quiet room. He thought about his mother's intelligence, which McGonagall had described in a corridor, and which Dumbledore had presumably known and worked with and built his plans around. "I'll receive it," Harry said. "Not today. When I'm ready." He paused. "And there are conditions." Tell me. The accounting is complete. Not the version you've decided is sufficient, complete. Everything you know that touches on my life and my choices and what's coming. He held the old blue eyes. In return, I'll give you a complete accounting of everything I've found and done since September. Including the Nexus, and what Snape told me at the Parley, and the Selwyn Journal. He paused. Full information, both directions. No more strategic withholding. Dumbledore was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Harry could hear the soft, rhythmic sound of Fawkes breathing. Agreed, Dumbledore said. He said it simply, without caveats, without the performance of considering it. He said it like a man who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has just set it down. It was, Harry thought, the most honest thing Dumbledore had ever said to him. Not the most important, the most honest. One more thing, Harry said. He reached into his bag and placed a folded document on the desk. This is a formal motion, filed with the Wisengamot this morning before I came back to Hogwarts. He slid it across. It's a proposed reframing of the war effort. Dumbledore picked it up and read it. His expression moved, surprise, recognition, something deeper. The motion was precise and complete. It framed the current conflict not as Dumbledore's Order versus Voldemort's Death Eaters, but as a formal defense of the Wizarding Commonwealth under a multi-body authority structure, the Wisengamot, independent houses, and the Order operating as one unified effort without a single commanding intelligence. It proposed shared decision-making, full information transparency across the structure, and named Harry Potter as a primary strategic partner with equal standing rather than a subordinate or a symbol. It also, in its final clause, formally invited Albus Dumbledore to participate in this structure as an equal contributor rather than its head. Dumbledore lowered the document. He looked at Harry. "You are not removing me," he said. It was not quite surprise. "I'm removing the structure that allowed any single person to make decisions for everyone else," Harry said. "Including me. No one person should be directing this war the way it's been directed." "You put yourself in the structure as an equal," Dumbledore said. "Not as its leader." "Yes. You could have claimed leadership. The Wisengamot seat, the alliance, the public standing, you have sufficient position." "I know," Harry said. "I don't want it. I want the fight run properly." Properly means distributed. Means transparent. Means everyone who's contributing gets to participate in the decisions. He paused. "Including you, if you want to." Dumbledore looked at the document for a long time. "You are," he said, quietly, "so very much your mother's son." Harry felt the specific impact of that. Not overwhelming, he'd spent 16 years without parents, and nothing restored that, but real. A gift, offered without expectation. "Thank you," he said. Dumbledore set the document down. "I'll sign it," he said. "Today." He told Daphne in the evening. Not the full conversation with Dumbledore, she'd get that in the debrief they'd scheduled for tomorrow, all four of them, with Tracy who had been running intelligence threads all week and had information about Call and his chain of command that Harry suspected would close that particular story decisively. He told her Dumbledore had agreed to sign. She was sitting in the same chair she'd used the first time they'd had a private conversation, the one in the East Astronomy Tower balcony. The stars were out again, clear and cold, and the castle was quiet below them. She listened to the full account without interrupting. When he finished she was quiet for a moment. "He'll honor it," she said. "The signing isn't just political. He's done something with his pride in agreeing to equal standing." A pause. "That's not a small thing for a man like him." "No," Harry agreed. "The motion will pass the Wisengamot. Augusta will make sure of it. Call will oppose it. Tracy's information will neutralize Call," Harry said. "He's been operating on instructions from a ministry official who's actually a Voldemort sympathizer. When that's public, his entire platform collapses," Daphne said. And the sympathizer goes to Azkaban. She looked at the stars. Tidy. Not my word, Harry said. Yours. You'd say tidy. I would, she agreed, and she was almost smiling, the real one she'd been doing more frequently since the Cairngorms. What about Voldemort? Harry thought about it honestly. He'll be displaced, he said. The despair anchor is gone. The propaganda victory he was trying to buy from me didn't come through. The betrothal alliance is solid. The multi-body structure for the war cuts off his ability to decapitate the effort by removing one leader. He paused. He'll be angry. He'll make a move. I don't know what shape it takes. But you'll see it coming. I'll see it coming. She looked at him. How? He smiled slightly. Because I'm not hiding anymore, he said. I spent 6 years making myself smaller, trying not to be the target, trying to manage what people thought of me. I'm not doing that. He looked out at the grounds, the enormous dark of them, the lake shimmering distantly. When you're fully visible, everything aimed at you is visible too. It's only hiding that makes you blind. Daphne was quiet for a moment. That's very Gryffindor of you, she said. It's also very Slytherin, he said. Visibility as strategy. Both can be true, she said. She turned slightly and looked at him the way she'd looked at him at dawn on the mountain, open and warm in herself. What do you want, Harry? When it's over. When the war's done and the motion has passed and the anchor's down and everything's been settled. She paused. What do you actually want? He thought about it. Genuinely, not the prepared answer, not the version he'd say to Dumbledore or the Wizengamot or the Order. The real one. A life I chose, he said. Not one that was chosen for me before I was old enough to know the difference. He looked at her. One with people I picked for real reasons, not because the prophecy put them in my path. He paused. One that's, he found the word. Quiet, occasionally. I'd like some quiet. Quiet would be a change, she said. I'd settle for occasional. She was looking at the stars and he was looking at her, and the castle was below them and the dark was all around and above it the stars were brilliant and numerous and indifferent. I want the same, she said. Quiet, occasionally. A life that's mine. A pause, softer. And I want it to involve someone who notices when I haven't slept and asks about the people I love and refuses to lose. She glanced at him sidelong. I'm told I know someone like that. Reliable source? Very, she said. He reached out and took her hand where it rested on the rail. She turned her hand and held his back, fingers interlaced, and they stood like that in the cold with the stars and the castle and the enormous dark, and it was enough for now. Below them, Hogwarts went on being what it had always been, magic and stone and 600 years of people who were young and afraid and learning, and it was the best place in the world to be those things in, and whatever came next, whatever Voldemort's next move was, whatever the Wizengamot decided and the Order argued and the Daily Prophet printed and the Ministry tried to legislate, Harry Potter was going to face it. Not as a sacrifice. Not as a soldier. Not as a chosen one on someone else's timeline. On his own terms, with his own people, with his eyes open. In a different part of the country, in whatever cold dark space he chose to occupy, Voldemort sat with the knowledge that something had changed. Not a loss, he didn't frame it that way, couldn't. But a shift in the ground beneath his plans, a quality of the world that was different from yesterday. He felt, for the first time in 30 years, that he was no longer operating in favorable conditions. He was, in a way he had no framework for, uncertain. And in his experience, the only thing that resolved uncertainty was action. He began to plan. In Greengrass Manor, Astoria Greengrass read her sister's letter for the third time in 20 minutes and looked out her bedroom window at the morning with bright, intent eyes. Her father had been less guarded this week, more willing to discuss things he usually kept from her. She was 14 and she was not stupid, and she knew the shape of what was coming, even if no one had given her the full map. She put the letter down and picked up a quill. She had thoughts about all of this. Several thoughts. Opinions, even. And she had decided, reading her sister's carefully composed account of everything that had happened, in which the warmth came through despite the composure, and the person who'd made the warmth was not so subtly present throughout, that whatever role she was meant to play in what came next, she intended to be ready for it. She began to write. Back at Hogwarts, in the Gryffindor common room at midnight, Ron Weasley sat across from Hermione Granger, and they were doing what they'd been doing for 6 years, which was talking, and the talking had drifted from the ley line and the motion and the cairngorms into something smaller and warmer and entirely its own thing. And at a certain point Hermione looked up from the parchment she was annotating and found Ron looking at her in a way that was not ambiguous, and she set down her quill. "Ron," she said. "I know," he said. I know. Do you?" I've known for a while," he said. So have I," she said. He looked at her. "Right," he said, quietly. "Right." He reached across the table and took her hand, and the fire was warm, and the common room was empty, and they were 16 and they had survived again, and the world outside was dangerous and real. And on the astronomy tower, 2 people stood at a rail with their hands interlaced and the stars above them and the work ahead of them, and neither of them was afraid. Not because there was nothing to be afraid of. Because they'd chosen this. All of it. On purpose. The war was not over. It was, in a meaningful sense, just beginning, reshaping itself around the new conditions, the new alliances, the new shape of Harry Potter, who had stepped off the board they'd built for him and built his own. But the ground was different now. The despair had been pulled from the soil. The terms had been set. And Harry James Potter, head of the ancient and noble house of Potter, with his intended beside him and his friends below him and his enemies in front of him, looked out at the world he'd chosen to fight for and felt, underneath everything, the clean and genuine and hard-won thing that 30 years of anchored darkness had been designed to prevent: hope. Real, specific, chosen hope. His.